cloud, 14 to 16 Celsius, but where we get some sunshine coming through, could get up to the high teens in places, for example, parts of western Scotland, although the north of Scotland subject to cloudier skies and some light showers from time to time, particularly for Shetland and Orkney. 11 Celsius as we end the day here. A lot of clear skies, though, remaining through the Highlands and to the Western Isles as well. Blue skies, beautiful afternoon and evening to come. But for much of the Midlands, the south and east of England, that's where the thickest cloud will remain. Some cloud breaks towards western fringes, and where we do get cloud breaks overnight, temperatures will fall into the mid or even low single figures, perhaps a touch of frost in places, even some mist and fog patches by dawn. But for many, we keep the cloud, and that cloud will continue to give some light showers, particularly through the North Sea coast and into the English Channel coast as we start off Wednesday. But Wednesday starts similar to Thursday with a lot of low cloud around, that low cloud drifting somewhat aimlessly across the country. Some reasonable cloud breaks, some sunshine coming through in the south of England, south and west Wales and northern Scotland. But elsewhere, it's simply another cloudy day with temperatures a little bit lower compared with Tuesday, mid-teens for many of us.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
There's just 3 weeks left to see how you could be our biggest winner this year. First, you could be driving away with this brand new Benamar Primera motorhome. This luxury vehicle comfortably sleeps 4, has its own fitted kitchen and bathroom areas, and comes complete with fitted awning and bicycle rack. And that's not all, as we'll also give you a whopping £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. For another chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB16 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 31st of October. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Decisions made in Washington aren't just shaping America, they're shaping Britain too. From migration to global security, from crime to health. Whatever happens in the White House today
will be felt in your town or city tomorrow.
That's why The Late Show is live from Washington, D.C.
Cutting through the politics to show you what it all means for Britain.
The Late Show live every night at midnight.
Only on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions, but every Friday night at 9 p.m. you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akua, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Tuesday, October the 14th. I'm Tom Harwood.
And I'm Nana Akua.
Now, the Nigel Farage death threat migrant is being sentenced as we speak. Small boat migrant Fayez Khan was convicted of his threats to kill the Reform Party leader, made in October last year.
The news comes as almost 2,000 small boat migrants arriving in the last 4 days was recorded, making 2025 the highest year of small boat arrivals on record.
Also this afternoon, we hear from the Prime Minister, fresh from his awkward meeting with President Trump in Sharm el-Sheikh. Prepare for a House of Commons dressing down for a Prime Minister under siege.
The Home Secretary has claimed some pro-Palestine protesters don't want peace, as protests on their streets are planned to continue despite the peace agreement. We ask, why do Palestine advocates refuse to acknowledge the ceasefire?
And pressure continues to pile on the Prime Minister over the China spy case. The Tories have now urged the chief prosecutor to restart the trial of the alleged spies if Labour declares Beijing a threat.
And it comes as there's more bad news for Rachel Reeves. Unemployment is up again today. The jobless rate is now the highest since the lockdown, and wage growth has cooled off too. With the highest inflation in the G7, Britain is in for a world of hurt in the next month's budget.
And whatever happened to the grooming gang inquiry? Well, a GBNews report uncovers legal mess and unacceptable delay as 9 months have now passed without any probes being launched.
And could the NHS begin screening all men between the ages of 50 and 69 for prostate cancer? A new campaign backed by the former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says that the move could save money and lives by catching the most common cancer in men early.
And over in Texas, Elon Musk's mega rocket Starship completed a successful test flight overnight, putting humans one step closer to the moon and to Mars. This success draws a line under a series of prototype explosions, or as the maverick billionaire described them, rapid, unscheduled disassemblies.
I can imagine somebody being rapidly unscheduled and disassembled.
Oh, we do like a euphemism. But no, this is quite exciting, really, seeing the biggest rocket ever built, ever flown, going successfully. It's a new age.
It is, really. I mean, I watched it live because I can be a bit of an insomniac, and I watched that, and I thought, oh, it doesn't really look like it's moving. But then it went up, and it went up, and it went up, and then I thought, well, what happens now? Do you know what I mean? But he is aiming. His main objective is to get to Mars, frankly, although, as you said, he has got a contract to get to the moon. But my favourite film, Total Recall. Have you seen it?
I haven't, but I do have a fun fact about Total Recall.
Go on, then.
So when Arnold Schwarzenegger was in that film, he was also running to be governor of California, but it wasn't the time of a normal election, it was a recall election. So he was promoting the recall of the governor as Total Recall the film was being advertised all over California, in effect free advertising for his recall petition, and then he got in as governor. So it's a nice double use.
I've heard that one before. No, but I love the film because obviously there's no air on Mars, there's no oxygen, and some people end up sort of blown out of this sort of thing that they're in, which obviously is where the air is pumped, and when they end up on the sand, their eyes go, oh! You want to watch it? It's actually quite good.
No, well, let's hope that doesn't happen to the new.
But that is a rapid, unscheduled disassemble
of a human being. Yes. Oh goodness me! It's not just rockets today. We should say. Of course, we are expecting that sentencing of this small boat migrant who threatened Nigel Farage. That is going to come in any minute now. We'll get to that after your latest news headlines.
Yes, Tom, thank you very much. And that breaking news has just come into us now that small boat migrant Fayaz Khan, who threatened to kill Reform UK leader Nigel Farage in a TikTok post last year, has been jailed at Southwark Crown Court for 5 years. Fayaz Khan made the threat between the October the 12th and the 15th last year in that TikTok video in which Mr Farage had described as pretty chilling. More on that breaking story as soon as we get it. But the small boat migrant Fayaz Khan, who threatened to kill the Reform UK leader, has been jailed for 5 years. The last 20 surviving Israeli hostages were finally reunited with their families, ending 2 years in Hamas captivity. In exchange, nearly 2,000 Palestinian detainees were released under President Trump's historic peace accord. Mr. Trump said he hopes the peace agreement signed at the global summit in Egypt will lead to the rebuilding of Gaza.
And after so many years of unceasing war and endless danger, today the skies are calm, the guns are silent, the sirens are still, and the sun rises on a holy land that is finally at peace, a land and a region that will live, God willing, in peace for all eternity.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu echoed that same message.
Mr. President, you are committed to this peace. I am committed to this peace. And together, Mr. President, we will achieve this peace.
Emotional images have emerged of hostages reuniting with their families, including a woman who reunited with her boyfriend after 2 years. Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Alex Burkhart, says he has high hopes for long-term peace.
Well, we've got to have hope. We've got to have hope. I think what you saw yesterday was a huge international desire for peace, and you saw all of those world leaders turning up to be with President Trump to support what's going on in the Middle East. And let's just hope that the fighting is ended. We're very, very pleased that the Israeli hostages appear to be coming home finally after their terrible ordeal. We're pleased that the shooting has stopped, and we're pleased that aid is going to be going into Gaza. So, look, there's a very, very long road to travel, but this is how good things start.
In other news, the government says the National Security Advisor Jonathan Powell was not involved in the decision to drop charges against 2 men accused of spying for China. That's after prosecutors unexpectedly dropped charges against Christopher Cash and Christopher Berry last month. Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch claimed the case collapsed because the government had refused to give the Crown Prosecution Service vital information as it wanted to, quote, curry favour with China. Security Minister Dan Jarvis dismissed claims the government deliberately collapsed the case as baseless. People should plan for potential cyber attacks by going back to pen and paper, according to the latest advice. The government has written to chief executives across the country, strongly recommending that they should have physical copies of their plans at the ready as a precaution. The warning comes as the National Cyber Security Centre reported an increase in nationally significant attacks this year. Criminal hacks on Marks & Spencer's, the Co-op and Jaguar Land Rover have led to empty shelves and production lines being halted this year as the companies struggled without their computer systems. Elsewhere, former Premier League referee David Coote has pleaded guilty to making an indecent image of a child. The 43-year-old was charged in August following an investigation by Nottinghamshire police. He's been granted conditional bail and told he must appear in court again on December the 11th. In other news, thousands of homes fitted with insulation under a flagship government scheme now need major work or risk damp and mould, the public spending watchdog has warned today. A damning report by the National Audit Office said clear failures in the energy company obligation scheme to tackle fuel poverty and pollution had led to low-quality installations and even potential fraud. It blamed incompetent subcontractors and weak monitoring and government oversight for the issues, which in extreme cases could cause fires. Nearly a third of the homes that were given internal insulation also need fixing, it said. Energy Consumer Minister Martin McCluskey said the government was taking action and that the homes would be fixed at no cost to the consumer. And finally, wage growth in the UK cooled slightly over the summer as unemployment ticked up marginally. Annual growth in employees' average earnings was 4.7% in the 3 months to August, down from 4.8% over the 3 months to July, according to the new data from the ONS. The national unemployment rate rose slightly from 4.7% to 4.8%. Those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, more in half an hour.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.3279 and €1.1487. The price of gold is £3,119.68 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 9,442 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Good afternoon, Britain. Now, Afghan migrant Fayez Khan has been jailed for 5 years for threatening to kill Nigel Farage, and that includes 8 months for entering the UK illegally. The small boat migrant shared videos of his journey to the UK online, alongside one video threatening to kill Nigel Farage.
Know me. I gonna come to England. I gonna pop, mother. Passa, man, you know. There's mother passa.
Well, let's go to the court now and speak to our national reporter, Will Godley, who's been following this case for us here at GB News, because this is actually a very significant moment. Will, what did go down in the court today, this morning, and indeed this afternoon?
Well, I can tell you, Tom, it had a very dramatic ending, something we were not expecting in court, as Fayez Khan was taken out of the dock after being sentenced to 5 years for making a threat to kill Nigel Farage. He was protesting his innocence, saying he did not come here to make threats or be violent. He said Nigel Farage was using him to become Prime Minister. He said he wanted to return to Afghanistan, where he's of course from. He was refusing to leave the dock. Court officers had to physically take him out of that door as he was holding the door frame to avoid being taken out. And as he was walking down the corridors, we could hear his screams of innocence get louder and louder, and his frustrations as he was taken out of the prison van, as we now see Nigel Farage making a statement.
Well, we can see Nigel Farage walking out there of the court. Let's listen in and see what the leader of the Reform Party has to say about this astonishing sentencing, this small boat migrant.
Well, I suppose we call that a win. It was about the maximum sentence that could possibly have been given, 5 years, given the scale of the offence. And I thank Justice Stein, I thank the judge for saying what she said. But the fact is that in 18 months' time, this violent criminal, somebody with 17 convictions in Sweden, in 18 months' time, he will be in this country, living in a house of multiple occupancy or a hotel. He'll be free to walk the streets whilst his asylum claim is being judged. And the only reason we know about this guy is because somebody sent it to me on TikTok. And it makes me wonder, how many other Madder passers are there now in this country, or will there be as the boats continue to cross the channel? So I'm pleased with the judgment, but deeply, deeply concerned that this guy will be out free in 18 months. A strange twist at the end, when he was after the sentence, he was speaking from the dock, trying to be heard, making it perfectly clear that he'd rather go back to Afghanistan. Now, in Germany, there are plane loads of people going back to Afghanistan. I wonder if in 18 months' time, the only thing that stops him being on our streets is we have some kind of deal with Afghanistan. I doubt it, but at least it's a possibility, and the Germans have shown us what they can do. So I've got mixed feelings. It was right to bring this case. I'm happy with the sentence. I'm happy with the win. But I repeat, in 18 months' time, this violent criminal will be free on our streets. Thank you. Sorry? Well, he wants to be deported. He said he'd rather go back to Afghanistan. You know, I mean, that's what he wants to do, and we should satisfy that as soon as we can. Well, I think, you know, being a member of Parliament, as we've seen over the course of the last decade, can be dangerous for all sorts of people.
Do you agree with the court's finding that he wasn't a, quote, dangerous offender within the legal provisions?
Well, I think most of the 17 offences were drugs, dishonesty, you know, quite how you define Dangerous, I don't know. But look, it was still a pretty harsh sentence, given many of the other things that we see in British courts. All right.
Just one more. His reaction at the end levelled a barrage of swear words at you.
Yes.
Accusations against you.
Yes.
What was your reaction in court? Were you shaken by that in the same way you were shaken by?
Well, in 18 months' time, when he's out free, and there's no order, there's no restraining order on him, I'll be very thoughtful again. Thank you, everybody.
Well, there, an impromptu press conference from the Reform Party leader Nigel Farage as a 5-year sentence is handed down to the small boat migrant who threatened to kill him. Live on the scene for us is, of course, Will Godley, our reporter. Let's cross to Will now to get some instant reaction. Well,
we heard there Nigel Farage saying he's deeply concerned that Fayez Khan could be out on the streets of Britain in as little as 18 months' time. That's despite the High Court judge in Southwark Crown Court here, Justice Stein, sentencing to Fayez Khan to 5 years in prison for making a threat to kill the leader of Reform UK. Half of that sentence, so after half of that sentence, he will be able to be released from prison out on licence and pending numerous conditions. But Nigel Farage, of course, describing the threat made against him on TikTok, on the Mada Passa TikTok account, which has hundreds of thousands of followers before it was deactivated and had more than 2 million views on that account. Nigel Farage described the threat as deeply pretty chilling and made him genuinely worried when he gave evidence in court last week. The jury took nearly 12 hours to find Fayez Khan guilty of making that threat, and the judge, in her decision-making when sentencing Fayez Khan, said there were 3 significant aggravating factors. Firstly, that Nigel Farage is a member of Parliament, a leader of Reform UK, a political party leader, and so she said this sentence had to be a deterrence, and it was an exceptionally serious crime to make a threat to an MP, especially as 2 had lost their lives to attacks. She also noted a significant criminal history in Sweden that the court was hearing today for the first time as a significant aggravating factor in this case. And thirdly, that he was boasting about his access to guns and weapons in his TikTok videos. Well, Fayez Khan sentenced to 5 years in prison. He was protesting that verdict as he was leaving the dock today, saying he wanted to return back to Afghanistan. He will now go off from here to prison, where he is sentenced to 5 years.
All right, Will Godley, thank you very much. Really good to speak to you. Interesting that, because there were a few things that he said that. So as he was taken down to the cells, he shouted, "I want to go back to Afghanistan. Send me back to Afghanistan. My family is in Afghanistan. You want to use me because you want to be Prime Minister," obviously referring to Nigel. "Just because you want to do that, you want to my life, you want to put me in prison." So that is just, you know, I just don't know why, if he wants to go back, why we don't send him back.
But how telling, though, that someone who supposedly came in as an asylum seeker, a bogus fake asylum seeker, is perfectly happy to live in Afghanistan. He's not in fear of his life in Afghanistan. He just wants to be in this country, perhaps for economic opportunity, all the free things we give him. Let's speak to the barrister and former Solicitor General for England and Wales, Robert Courts. Robert, this is the most extraordinary case, but I suppose it raises a big question. I mean, how many more people are coming across on these small boats with dozens of previous convictions, perhaps lying about their age, lying about their name, lying about their status as a refugee? I mean, it's a huge problem for this country.
Yes, it is exactly as you say, Tom, a really extraordinary case. I mean, it's that twist at the end, isn't it, of him shouting that he wants to go back to Afghanistan, which, of course, is the opposite of what is normally claimed in these cases. This is clearly a really very straightforward example of the risks that are being run, of the security threat that is faced, and why we have to be in a position that we know who is coming into our country and we're able to keep tabs on them, know who they are, know what they are, know if they face any risks, and then and for those people then to be returned to their country of origin if they're not the sort of people that we want here. This case of someone with a long criminal history and clearly violent and making threats against an elected politician is a clear very straightforward case of the sort of person who we oughtn't to be having here at all.
Well, why can't we send him back? He said he wants to go back. He's clearly not facing any persecution. He's been sentenced in this country. Why do we have to put him through his sentence? Why can't we just deport him and that's that and be done with it?
Yeah, it's a very good question. It's a question that people will be asking all over the country. It's usually about the state of the returns agreement with that country, whether there's a government that you can deal with on the other side, whether they will accept people back. There's also something about the principle of serving the penalty in the place where you committed the crime. But nonetheless, really, sometimes there are clear cases which just show that there needs to be a change. And if there couldn't be, in my view, a clearer case of someone who is violent, who came here with ill intent, who made it absolutely clear, and the British people will be asking themselves why we should be paying for someone to be imprisoned in this country when we have prison overcrowding issues and many other people needing that space, rather than simply to do what is, after all, what he wants, which is to be returned to Afghanistan.
But the Taliban said that they'll take back anybody to Afghanistan. So why can't... What agreement do we need? He should just be sent back.
Yeah, I mean, that is, without knowing more about the background, and that is usually the case, that it's about the state of the returns agreement. But in any event, I make no excuse for the system. This is clearly a case where someone like that should be sent out of the country as quickly as possible.
Now, it's clear that this is a man who has lied time and time again on his way in, and I suppose it raises questions about the entirety of our asylum system. There's some reporting now that actually Fayez Khan might not be his real name, and that he was going by a name Fayez Husseini, in Sweden, where he got these 17 convictions for all sorts of other offences. Perhaps he isn't 26 years old, as he told the British authorities, but 31 years old, as the Swedish authorities seem to think. This is just the tip of an iceberg of what people who throw their documents away, who come by illegal means into this country, I mean, they've just got no incentive to tell the truth about anything about who they are.
Well, you've got to control your borders. No country that can't control its borders is truly sovereign and independent and isn't ultimately able to defend itself against people who, with ill intent, looking to come in. And you're absolutely right. These are criminal gangs behind this. These people are utterly scrupulous. They will tell people to dispatch of their documents, and you have to have a deterrent there at the end. So, we, of course, had the Rwanda scheme, which this government abolished on day one, meaning there's no deterrent. And that was what that scheme was all about. And I think ministers right now should be scratching their heads and thinking about how they can provide precisely that deterrent. Rwanda is one way of doing it, but in a clear case like this, where you have someone who has, on the basis of that reporting, who has lied, who clearly has violent intent, who clearly has no place in this country, that there really just needs to be a straightforward rule that those people don't have their claims heard.
All right, Robert Courts, thank you very much. Really good to talk to you. He is a barrister and former Solicitor General for England and Wales.
Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more still to come.
A leading child abuse lawyer has warned the grooming gangs inquiry is in a legal mess and will struggle to return before the next general election. Our national reporter Charlie Peters will be here to tell us more.
You're with GB News, Britain's #1 news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
And I'm very pleased to say I've got joining me down the line Sir Geoffrey Boycott, former Yorkshire and England cricketer. Now, Geoffrey, he didn't umpire quite as many test matches as you played, but boy, he was around for a long time, wasn't he?
It was special, mainly because he made good decisions, but he also... The players loved him. He was honest, he was fair, but he had humour. He could manage to diffuse situations. And they just liked being with him. He made you laugh. Yeah, I first met him, I was 15. My Uncle Algie took me to Barnsley Cricket Club. He was a star player. He got 50 every week. He was a very, very good player. Michael Parkinson was there, sometimes played. Michael was quite good. I've known both of them for a long time. They were like elder brothers to me. And so over 70 years, I've seen him as a player. Technically, he was very good. But unfortunately, he was very nervous. When I first got in the team at 16, he used to say to me, "Put my gloves on, Gerald." He was shaking like this. And I said, "My name's Jeffrey." He said, "Right, Gerald, put my gloves on, please." And he called me Gerald for about, I don't know how many years. We had a little birthday party when my daughter Emma was about 16. And she said to him at that, she said, "Dickie, you've got to stop calling him Gerald. His name's Jeffrey." So from then on, I got Jeffrey. And he loved it. He loved Emma. He said to her, he said, "If I had a daughter, I'd like to be just like you." She said, "Well, you can adopt me then, quick as a wink." He was a character. Look, he was lovable.
GB News, the People's Channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
26 minutes after midday. In a GB News exclusive, grooming gangs inquiries have been described as a legal mess and will struggle to return before the next general election.
Yes, leading child abuse lawyer David Greenwood told GB News that there had been months of unacceptable delay since the abuse scandal re-emerged this year.
Former Home Secretary Yvette Cooper committed to 5 local inquiries back in January, but 9 months have passed without anything being launched.
Well, joining us now is our national reporter, Charlie Peters, because, Charlie, I do often think about this. The government made such a song and dance about starting this inquiry, and then silence.
Yes, and silence that David Greenwood is very worried about, saying that Sir Keir Starmer could end up looking silly if this process is delayed too much. In particular, he's referring to the fact that it could now return after the next general election, and he's saying that is an unacceptably long time for the survivors to have to wait, especially as Louise Casey, who sort of made that recommendation for this inquiry after conducting her audit earlier in the year, said it could take 2 to 3 years. For it to then be delayed further would be unacceptable, and that's the views of David Greenwood, who's represented hundreds of claimants in these cases right across the country, but in particular in Yorkshire and Rotherham as well. But we've also heard today from survivors engaged in the inquiry process, those who the government are aware of and, of course, are speaking to as part of this engagement, all speaking anonymously about their concerns that the inquiry could be watered down or diluted by virtue of expansion, that it could, they say, they fear, start to ask questions about abuse not just to do with grooming gangs, and that could expand the remit and therefore make it lose focus. And I've heard other lawyers that I'm speaking to about this, they've been speaking anonymously as well, saying that they share those concerns too. Now, one survivor, and a lot of these women usually speak with pseudonyms, but they're speaking out today totally anonymously because they are concerned about reaction to this concern. They're saying that if it is widened, if the scope does expand, then they're risking having ICSA all over again, referring to the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse.
And to be clear, with ICSA, the government often says that, well, this was an inquiry into grooming gangs, but I mean, how much of that report, which looked at Jimmy Savile, which looked at the BBC, which looked at the Catholic Church, which looked at the Church of England, I mean, how much of that inquiry actually focused on grooming gangs as we understand them?
It was a subsection of a sub-report on organised networks, and they took evidence for 2 weeks. Of the at least 1,000 people who gave evidence to ICSA, only one core participant was a grooming gang victim. They looked at areas such as Warwickshire and St Helens, but they didn't look at, say, Bradford or Birmingham, 2 areas that have escaped local inquiries but certainly need them now. We've also heard from those survivors and David Greenwood echoing this concern very separately. They are worried that the inquiry process could be dragged out because the evidence taking process takes so long with inquiries, particularly statutory inquiries, because when it's sitting, it's very expensive when lawyers are around working day in, day out. They think that local inquiries, such as the ones they announced in January, could have been returning already 9 months later with more information. But when Yvette Cooper and Jess Phillips were making those commitments to local inquiries, none were actually delivered. Oldham, for example, which was the only town promised a local inquiry in January, the only one that asked for one, I should also stress, they're still waiting for something to get going. They're still waiting for direction from the Home Office. And 2 weeks ago, we revealed at GB News that Oldham had been offered a truth project instead of an inquiry, which was reacted to very severely by survivors and their families in the town. They don't want a truth project, they want justice. And justice means an inquiry. It means that evidence and personnel are compelled to be provided and to be cross-examined by a judge and other solicitors as well. So lots of work still to be done and lots of clarity required for these survivors. The Home Office, though, they're saying, look, we've got the resources, we've got the timings and the powers for this inquiry to take place. They've said that we need to make sure this sort of abuse never happens again. But the question still remains, when are you going to get started? Because it's been 4 months today since they made that announcement.
Is there any evidence that there's a deliberate delay at all? Because I'm sure for some people it'll be in their interests for it to be dragged out, and I think in particular potentially the Labour parties, because they don't want this all exposed during their watch. They would probably rather focus on something else.
Well, we do know that, for example, in years gone by, we've heard from former Labour figures like Simon Danczuk, who said that when he was asked to talk about this, he was told, well, firstly, don't talk about it, and if you do, avoid the issue of ethnicity, because that could be very difficult and politically dangerous for us. Now, what's interesting is that we've heard recently in Bradford, in West Yorkshire, we've had the deputy mayor there come forward and ask for a region-wide inquiry. Now, Bradford is an area that needs a lot of focus. Robbie Moore, the MP for Keighley and Ilkley, he's been saying that there needs to be a Bradford-specific inquiry. I've now heard from some survivors in West Yorkshire saying they don't want a region-wide focus. That's, again, another potential expansion that could dilute it. They want what we had in Rotherham, in Rochdale and in Telford, those very specific and directed reviews, rather than expanding it to a broader focus.
So when it comes to what we actually know about what this inquiry will look like, personnel appointed? Is this going to be a hub and spoke model? Is this going to be a statutory inquiry with the power to compel witnesses? Do we know these key details?
No, all they're saying so far is that it will be a statutory inquiry and that locally led reviews or local inquiries will feed into this national picture. They've also said that the National Police Inquiry, Operation Beaconport, being led by the NCA, the National Crime Agency, that's up and running. That's reviewing cold cases, over 1,000 being reopened and lots of other work being done by that new force to assess the national links, of course, trafficking links, interlinking towns and cities, and how these abuse networks are so closely aligned. That's an element that's not really been focused on before. We've had these local investigations, not that national linked up understanding of these organised criminal gangs, often not just involved in this sort of abuse, but also, as those engaged with this research will know, they're also dealing heroin, they're also running drug gangs, they're also moving around guns and racketeering, they're involved in a wider level of criminal exploitation. But on the 2nd of September in the House of Commons, in terms of what we know about this inquiry, Jess Phillips said, we are at the final stages of finding a chair for this, the final stages. Well, it's now October the 14th, and we're not much closer. We knew that we do know that...
The Home Office has had, I mean, huge personnel change in that time. We've got a new Home Secretary, we've got new Home Office ministers. Will that have delayed and interrupted the process?
I don't think so, because Jess Phillips is still the safeguarding minister responsible for this. The civil servants haven't moved around. The team is still there working on it. But I'm starting to wonder, are they in the final stages that is now expanding into potentially 2 months because they can't find someone who wants to do it? That's the question that I think needs to be asked. Are a lot of judges looking at this process and thinking, I don't want to be part of this? Is this too politically toxic after the delay and the row that happened earlier this year? Is this the sort of process that I could be pilloried if I don't get to the bottom of this crisis? I think it's possible that the problem that the Home Office are having now is potentially that they're struggling to find someone to chair it. And I have to say, I've always said before that I think who they should be getting is a foreign judge, perhaps someone from Australia or New Zealand, common law, but not connected to our politics.
Well, they had the same problem with Border Control Command. Thank you very much, Charlie Peters. Right, well, stay with us. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up on today's show.
Yes, in what will come as grim news for the Chancellor Rachel Reeves, unemployment has hit a 4-year high, the highest since lockdown, as what she will include in her upcoming budget is all deliberated over. But before we get to that, and indeed before we expect to hear from the Prime Minister live, here's the latest news with Tatiana.
Tom, thank you very much. The top story, small boat migrant Fayez Khan, who threatened to kill Reform UK leader Nigel Farage in a TikTok post last year, has been jailed for 5 years. Khan made the threat between October the 12th and the 15th last year in a video which Mr Farage described as pretty chilling. Mr Farage says he is happy with the sentence given today.
And the only reason we know about this guy is because somebody sent it to me on TikTok. And it makes me wonder, how many other Madapassers are there now in this country, or will there be as the boats continue to cross the channel?
The last 20 surviving Israeli hostages were finally reunited with their families, ending 2 years in Hamas captivity. In exchange, nearly 2,000 Palestinian detainees were released under President Trump's historic peace accord. Mr. Trump said he hopes the peace agreement signed at the Global Summit in Egypt will lead to the rebuilding of Gaza. Former Premier League referee David Coote has pleaded guilty to making an indecent image of a child. The 43-year-old was charged in August following an investigation by Nottinghamshire police. He's been granted conditional bail and told he must appear in court again on the 11th of December. And those are the latest headlines for now. More in half an hour.
You can now watch GB News live across the United States of America and the world on Truth Plus. Scan the QR code to find out more, or visit gbnews.com/truth.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 36 minutes past midday. Now, we're expecting to hear from the Prime Minister in just a moment or two. We can show you live pictures of the House of Commons where the Prime Minister has just sat down. And, of course, he's going to be telling the Commons all about his escapade to the Middle East. But, Nana, I wonder...
Will he tell them about the bit where he went up to shake hands with Donald Trump and then thought he was going to speak?
Ooh,
that was so embarrassing.
It's awkward, wasn't it?
I just thought, why is it that he seems to get himself into these awkward moments? He's almost like a Joe Biden-esque.
Well, Catherine Forster, our political correspondent, has joined us. What do you make of that?
Well, I was watching very closely because, of course, it went viral, didn't it? It was a bit like when he was in Canada and Trump dropped the papers and he sort of rushed to pick them up. But Trump did actually say, "Come here." Trump did say, "Come here," so he went there.
But just not to speak, to sort of shake hands.
Come here, and then he said, "How are you?" And the Prime Minister said, "Very good." And then Trump just turned around and went, "They've all come at 20 minutes notice," and there he was. But he wasn't the only one that it was awkward for, because Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, Trump referred to him as the President. They had a joke about
Mark
that.
Carney.
Mark Carney. Oh, yes. Justin Trudeau's the previous one. I'm still sweet surprised from him.
The New York Post.
Oh, my goodness. Pardon me.
In an embrace.
They were, goodness me.
And Giorgia Meloni, I don't think, was very impressed looking at. She's got a very expressive face, hasn't she? The Italian Prime Minister. And Trump was calling her a young woman and a beautiful young woman. And I don't think she was thrilled about that.
It wouldn't have been so bad if he hadn't sort of turned around and walked back so you saw his back. He could have taken a few steps backwards, sort of thing.
It was very awkward.
Some people just seem natural on a stage, and Keir Starmer has never been one of those people. He's sort of too wooden, too perfunctory to be sort of a comfortable, at ease sort of... Donald Trump owns whatever stage he walks onto. Theresa May never did. Boris Johnson always did. There are just different personality types when it comes to sort of big events like that.
I completely agree. I think you are either sort of, you know, comfortable and you own the stage. And of course, it was the Donald Trump show, wasn't it? We had all these leaders that came at very short notice. But so Keir Starmer, and I spend quite a lot of time fairly close to him, and there's just always a reserve and a slight awkwardness that I think it's very difficult to sort of get beyond when you see him, you know, on camera.
This is quite a handy distraction for him, though. At the moment, I'm hoping that Kevin Badenoch will challenge him during PMQs on the China stuff. But, you know, it's just all quite handy from as a distraction. He's had quite a few things that have come in the way when something bad has been
Now,
going on for him.
the Prime Minister's statement has been delayed by a point of order from the leader of the Liberal Democrats, so it might be a little moment's time before we hear from the Prime Minister. But, Catherine, what did you make of what yesterday really was about for people like the European leaders? Obviously, for Donald Trump, it was his moment. He was over at the Knesset in Israel and over at the Peace Summit. To some extent, European leaders, Keir Starmer, Mark Carney, I mean, they were all a bit of a sideshow, weren't they?
I think they were. I think they wanted to be there because they could see that this was a historic moment. You don't get good news very often, and I think they wanted to be there and show their support and be in the photographs. Obviously, the Prime Minister, you know, that was all very awkward, that moment, but there he was behind Trump. But yes, I mean, it was totally Donald Trump's moment. But the British government would say, we had that very awkward exchange at the weekend when Bridget Phillips said about the work that Britain had been doing. It seemed to sort of overplay their hand. But Britain, this is Trump's win, clearly. You know, he owns it. But Britain is working behind the scenes. OK, publicly, all that we did was the recognition of Palestine as a state, which may not have helped, let's face it. But behind the scenes, Jonathan Powell, this beleaguered national security advisor, has, we understand, been instrumental in that his experience in getting the Good Friday Agreement, Northern Ireland, making it clear that you have to do unpalatable things to get peace. So, you know, we've had 20 living hostages, there's the bodies of 24 more that are deceased, but, you know, they've released, well over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners. That's some very, very high
murderers, terrorists.
Yeah.
I mean, these are people who aren't just sort of political prisoners. These are violent people that they've
precisely, released. And that will have been very difficult for Israel to stomach. And, you know, there's people on the hard right of the Israeli government that would not have wanted to do. So Jonathan Powell's role apparently has been sort of helping to make them understand that you've really got to do some sort of, there's been some horrible compromise.
And yet, obviously, there was that tweet yesterday from Steve Witkoff, the US peace envoy. A very unusual public statement to make, where in the early hours of the morning he just sort of issued special thanks to Jonathan Powell, who, in case anyone's forgotten, is under incredible hot water here at home over his role in collapsing or allegedly collapsing a Chinese spy trial.
Yeah, I mean, at the lobby briefing yesterday, Number 10 basically wouldn't be drawn on it. But the timing of it was, let's say, very convenient. So you would wonder, wouldn't you, whether a word had been put in to sort of help Jonathan Powell out. Of course, on China at the moment, they're throwing his deputy under the bus rather than him.
All right, well, listen, there's been some breaking news in the last half hour. Migrants will be required to pass tough new English language requirements under a law introduced in Parliament today as the government continues to replace Britain's failed immigration system with one that is controlled, selective and fair. The government says the immigrants applying via certain legal routes must meet an A-level equivalent standard in speaking, listening, reading and writing. The test must be conducted with a Home Office-approved provider, and the results will then be verified as part of the visa application process. I'm presuming, though, this is for legal migrants.
Well, exactly.
So this is for legal migrants, where we had control of, and I don't know why we didn't put this thing in anyway.
Yes, but, you know, we've got a new Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, who's making much tougher noises, and this should make it harder to get to stay. And, of course, we've seen that huge rise in legal migration, up to nearly 1 million under Boris Johnson. They call it the Boris wave, don't they? And though it is coming down, it's still very, very high. And the government does realise that it isn't just people crossing the channel illegally on small boats that's making people cross. It's the level of legal migration where people feel their kids can't get on the housing ladder, they can't get into their local school, they can't get a doctor's appointment. It's all of the same picture of the general discontent. So I think the government do realise that they need to make it much, much tougher. But How long is all this going to take, and is it going to come in time for people to feel better about the government, because they're very, very unpopular, and we're looking forward to the May by-elections. And in Scotland and Wales next year, and if they are really dire for the government, as it seems like they might be, then I think the Prime Minister's position is pretty fragile.
It is interesting because there have been language tests that have been instituted to little effect before. I'm thinking particularly about something that the Mayor of London did for taxi licensing and Uber licensing and things like that in London, where he said, well, not enough taxi drivers speak English, so we're going to institute an English language test. You're going to have English language qualifications if you're going to be driving these cars. But what happened as a result of that? The English got worse. Why? If you speak English natively, you're unlikely to have a qualification in speaking English. And so it almost became the reserve of people who spoke English as a second language rather than a first language, because obviously I don't have a qualification in speaking English. None of us have a qualification in speaking English. You'd only have that if it was your second language.
Well, you have English language.
Will this disadvantage Australians? Well,
for most of us, that appreciation comes from the rather sedentary position on these benches, not from the international running track, where Lord Campbell of Pittenweem first represented Great Britain at the Olympic Games in Tokyo in 1964. He remained quick on his feet, Mr. Speaker, as a barrister before becoming an MP, where I'm told he made the most of his talents by sprinting door to door whilst canvassing. Ultimately, of course, he became a respected voice on foreign and defence affairs, becoming leader of the Liberal Democrats. This was despite many overtures from one of my predecessors, his old Glasgow University friend, John Smith, to join the Labour Party as a young man. No, Ming, as many came to know him, was determined and he knew his own mind. And he was authoritative on the subjects that he was passionate about. So it was no wonder that he had the respect and admiration of colleagues across the House, who recognised his wisdom and unfailing kindness. Over 28 years of service as a member of this Parliament. Today we remember his commitment to Scotland, in particular, of course, to Fife, championing its industries, from fishing to, in his case, flying, as well as becoming Chancellor of St Andrews University, where he spoke of his joy at meeting students and young people full of hope for the future, a future he had done so much to shape. Mr. Speaker, it was a full life, well lived, alongside Elspeth, his beloved wife of more than 50 years. We are all enriched by his sense of duty and commitment to this country. He stands in the finest traditions of this House. And so, Mr. Speaker, it is a privilege, on behalf of these benches, to pay tribute to the Flying Scotsman. May he rest in peace.
Point for the comeback.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And on that point of order, and on behalf of the Conservative Party, I would like to add my voice to the tributes paid today to Lord Campbell. I had the pleasure of meeting Sir Ming Campbell, as he was then, just once, backstage, before any questions. He was very courteous, very curious, and very earnest. We all know how well respected he was across this House, not least because of the efforts he made to work cross-party, especially on international matters. Mr. Speaker, he was a man with a clear sense of right and wrong, committed to doing the right thing, even when it was difficult or unpopular. So I very much hope that his legacy of careful thought, integrity, and public service endures. And on behalf of myself and my party, I extend heartfelt condolences to Sir Ming's family, to his party, and to all those who knew him and loved him.
Point for order, John MacDonald.
For those of us who were here during the debate on the Iraq War, on all sides, I want to thank Min for the legal advice that he provided us and the way that he addressed that debate, because he did so without seeking any party advantage.
Well, we've been listening there to just some of the tributes being laid on the floor of the House of Commons by all the parties to Sir Ming Campbell, of course, the former leader of the Liberal Democrats, who died just 2 weeks ago. But before we get to the Middle East statement that we're expecting from the Prime Minister, we are, of course, joined in the studio by Catherine Forster, our political correspondent, and we have been looking back over what actually the entirety of this peace plan for the Middle East might look like, and where does Britain fit in? Because the Home Secretary has had something to say overnight about how she believes there are some people who have these protests every single week on the streets of our country that seem to be going on despite the peace process. The Home Secretary is suggesting that some of these people don't really want peace.
Yes, indeed. And I mean, this peace deal was announced at the end of last week, wasn't it? And yet then there was a big protest on Saturday. GBNews were there. And you might think that we now have peace. Hopefully it will last. So why are people protesting? But it would seem that many of these it's not enough. It doesn't appear to be enough. And you do wonder, don't you? Shabana Mahmood has talked about these protests before, and the Prime Minister previously asked them, not to go ahead after the terror attacks against Jews just a couple of weeks ago. You do wonder now whether the government is going to get tougher. Of course, I mean, the police are operationally independent, but you wonder how long these protests are going to continue.
Because, I mean, I've been watching a lot of the coverage as well, and also the coverage in Gaza, and it is quite concerning. One of the main things that I noticed is, obviously, with all the prisoners being released back into Gaza, this is not a great thing for the Gaza there. And I'm wondering how they're going to get to that next stage of the peace deal. Who's going to police Gaza during the time in between? I mean, are they talking about how they're going to manage that at all?
Well, I mean, Donald Trump was 3 hours late, wasn't he, yesterday, getting to Sharm el-Sheikh, and so there were lots of leaders with time on their hands that found they had, normally these visits are coordinated to the minute, but that they had time to be sitting and talking about this. I do know that our Prime Minister is talking about sort of arms decommissioning of Hamas and talking about Northern Ireland, and because of experience there, and Jonathan Powell, again, the National Security Advisor, because of his experience with Northern Ireland, the Good Friday Agreement, that Britain could help in that way. But there's so much that we simply don't know. In a way, yesterday was almost the easy bit, because there's the bodies of the hostages. That may not be as quick and easy as we might like. And the Board of Peace, who is going to run Gaza? Because Tony Blair, it was announced just a few days ago, sounded like he would be sort of chairing, well, the president is chairing that board, but have a very active role on that board. And then yesterday, President Trump said, well, that's up for discussion. We have to make sure that everybody is happy with that. And of course, Tony Blair, let's face it, has a pretty controversial record, doesn't he? So I think there's a big question mark over that, and who does what, and how it's going to be phenomenally complicated.
See, because that could almost justify why they continue to protest. I mean, they move the goalposts all the time, but, it's not done, is it? And as you said, that bit is the beginning bit. But I hear what Shabana Mahmood is saying. I'm wondering whether they'd consider, perhaps, because she was talking about laws to stop repeated protest, and people were complaining about that, and it was a freedom of speech issue. But I'm thinking that with repeated protests, perhaps people should be, instead of removed, fined. If you fine someone at the protest, say, like 200 quid, 250 quid for repeatedly protesting or whatever, then perhaps that will deter people. I don't know. I'm just, thinking out loud.
Well, I think part of the idea was that currently there is each and every protest is assessed by sort of on its own merits, whereas the change will be the cumulative disruption of a series of protests that happen, for example, every Saturday, will be taken into account. I suppose a second-order question of that is then, well, what is the punishment if someone breaches that order, where a fine could, I suppose, come in? But I suppose the first thing is that the police are going to be given this power to say that this is not a protest you should be at in the first place, which up until now they claim they haven't had the authority to disseminate.
And there's a real problem with resources, because every time you have one of these protests, it takes huge amounts of police resources that, you know, the police are very stretched as it is, that could perhaps be better spent elsewhere. And then, of course, since the government have prescribed Palestine Action as a terrorist organisation, we are seeing hundreds of arrests, commonly, quite often of fairly respectable middle-aged people. They then have to all be processed. So the whole thing really is a nightmare for the police.
Do you think the government's made a misstep there? I mean, I just looking at, obviously Palestine Action are a terrible group who commit sabotage against British businesses and all the rest of it. They're a violent group, but to use anti-terror legislation to prescribe them has had this peculiar effect where little old ladies can turn up in London and write, "I support Palestine Action" on a piece of paper and face arrest. I mean, that's giving a propaganda victory to those who would say that the government doesn't want you to protest or to speak your mind on Gaza. I mean, when actually these people are writing in support of what is now a prescribed terror organisation. But I wouldn't put Palestine Action in the same bucket as ISIS or Al-Qaeda. Has the government made a misstep there?
I wonder whether the government didn't think that doing that would basically mean that a lot of people would simply stay at home, and that the air might go out of these protests a bit. But it doesn't seem to have worked at all, because I think the people that are going are thinking, well, why shouldn't I? Because, you know, many of them will consider that there's been a genocide taking place in Gaza. And so I suspect it hasn't really worked like the government would have intended, because it has made actually a whole lot more work for the police, who are already
it also
very stretched.
dilutes this idea, because people there aren't being arrested for being violent, but for writing words on a placard. And so
I think that's fair enough. I think that's fair enough. I think the government have got that right. There were, about 500 people at the protest this time, and they were mostly senior citizens. I objected them, they called middle-aged. They weren't. I think the average age was about 60. So they were mainly senior citizens who, if they got arrested, they won't be going back to work anyway, and probably quite wealthy. And it was students who, foolishly, I think, were being misled by some of their lecturers.
But should you be able to be arrested for just holding up a sign with some words on?
Absolutely, depending on what the words say. 100%.
Just the words, "I support Palestine Action." You think
well,
you
if
should be able to be
Palestine
arrested?
Action is a prescribed terrorist organisation, then you are showing your support to a banned group that are prescribed, so therefore you are breaking the law. I think we need to be realistic here when we talk about freedom of speech and expression. It has to be within the confines of our British law.
But these people aren't doing anything violent. And half the people...
It's not just about violence.
Half the people holding up signs saying, "I support Palestine Action," probably don't know that Palestine Action was a group that went and smashed up factories and all the rest of it.
Well, that's their silly fault, and you can't, you know, stupidity, you can't excuse people for stupidity. You do something stupid and break the law, you've broken the law.
You do find, don't you, quite often on these protests, I mean, I covered them for GB News in the immediate aftermath of October the 7th, but often watching, you know, our GB News journalists in the last few weeks, what's really struck me is when you interview people about why they're there...
They don't know.
They don't... They're there because they don't want to see people being killed in Gaza. But beyond that, they very often know next to nothing about the history of the Middle East, or they know about it on a very, very surface level.
They don't know from what river to what sea.
Exactly.
They don't know anything about... They don't really understand what Hamas are about. They don't really understand anything, even holding some of the signs they're holding up. I remember one reporter said, "Oh, where did you get that sign?" I said, "Oh, she gave it to me," and it was some really offensive sign.
There's a huge
ridiculous
industry. I haven't covered the protest for a while, but when I was going quite regularly, pretty much every Saturday, there was a whole industry had come up of people selling caps and T-shirts and badges and like if you were going to a football match, the sort of merch that you would. And I did just find that quite astonishing. It had become like an event, something that you do on a Saturday.
Well, there were 13 coachloads of people coming from different parts of the country. Do you know what I mean? To come down, it's like it's become a jolly. They do it every week. They don't know what they would do without it. Oh, on my weekend in London doing this.
Penny Mordaunt, the former Defence Secretary, has been writing reports on sort of community cohesion and all the rest of it. And she was saying recently that there were sort of two groups of people. I mean, there are some really nasty elements of people who go on those protests. But for the most part, I mean, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of people there. They're not all virulent anti-Semites. You've got some people who genuinely hate Jews on those marches, and then you've got a lot of useful idiots as well.
You have, and I've talked to many people who are perfectly nice, respectable, with dogs, with little children, and they're just there because they don't want to see people dying, and that's the bottom line. But then we talk to other people and scratch below the surface. And, you know, I remember saying shortly after October the 7th about the hostages that had been taken, and there was very little, in fact, no sympathy from some people who obviously see Israel as the enemy and beyond the pale.
Well, you see, it also encourages, remember that girl who was taking down the ribbons, cutting up the ribbons of the hostages. It's that kind of behaviour that is allowed to fester in these kind of environments. I think Shabana Mahmood does make a point that why are they protesting, but we have to acknowledge that it's not over yet. But I agree that repeated protests on the same subject, which Jewish people are now afraid to go out on the streets. And I hear people saying, oh, I know loads of Jewish people on the protests, and I think, come on. Let's be honest here.
I have seen Jewish people on the protest, but I think, given the events in Manchester a couple of weeks ago, that to say it was tone deaf would be putting it very, very mildly. Clearly, many Jewish people are feeling frightened in Britain, which is something which is a really sad reflection of where we are. But, I mean, these protests happen literally all around the world. I mean, I was in Copenhagen for the European Political Community meeting a week and a half ago, and I was setting up for a live at 8 o'clock in the morning, and the next thing I know, there's pro-Palestine protesters, and we lost the live because of it. We couldn't...
Really? Because they disrupted your journalism?
We couldn't do it, basically, because they were chanting and shouting, so, you know, we couldn't do the live, we couldn't move.
Wow.
What did you do? Go to the pub?
Not at 8 in the morning, and especially not in Denmark, where beer is even more expensive than it is in the United Kingdom.
Tell me about it.
But I suppose it does raise this question about societal cohesion, community cohesion. These are problems that are thousands of miles away, and yet they are also problems that are now on our streets, in our towns and cities. And there'll be a lot of people in this country who are just thinking, what does this have to do with Britain? Why are people disrupting our towns and cities, going on these protests, making people feel intimidated, all the rest of it, when this is not our problem?
And also, it has been a big, big problem for the Labour Party and the Labour government. Of course, they upset a lot of people by recognising Palestine as a state, but there's plenty of their supporters and backbenchers that felt that they hadn't gone far enough. There's previous Labour MPs that lost their seats to independents. And I remember on the election campaign being on the bus with the branded Labour bus with the Prime Minister. He didn't get on that bus much because of security threats coming out of, I think it was Stoke-on-Trent. And there were a couple of dozen pro-Palestine men, basically, in the middle of the day with a Palestine-branded car and all the rest of it. And they were screaming at us, "You're baby murderers," like really vicious and nasty. They didn't know that we were journalists, but to Labour members, because so many of them think that Labour have sat on their hands and not done...
And you saw that in Leicester with Jonathan Ashworth's seat, the former Shadow Cabinet Minister who lost his seat. Jess Phillips came close to losing her seat to a Gaza independent, and she's spoken of the real vitriol and sort of... intimidation, where some of these Gaza independents, they travel around in sort of packs and sort of find the canvassers for other parties and heckle and harass them.
I'm just thinking, actually, even at, I think it was a village hall somewhere near the south coast for some Tory event, a pro-Palestine person found the live and managed to sabotage it. No matter where you go, there will be...
So you've been trying to do your job as a journalist everywhere from somewhere on the south coast of England to Copenhagen, where your job's actually been interrupted by these people.
Yeah, it has. And I mean, OK, that's not much of a hardship, but I think also for businesses in London and the places where these take place week after week after week, it's very difficult running your business
Well, especially, and it's very difficult if you are Jewish to be going, feeling safe and comfortable in this country. I understand many of them
think there's
want
areas
to leave.
that Jewish people just wouldn't go on a Saturday in London and other cities as well.
I want to ask you about Bridget Phillipson, because she was called delusional after the US ambassador to Israel labelled her that after she claimed that we had done a lot, that the UK had done a lot to support and get this peace agreement together. What has the UK really done to support this peace deal? What was she talking about?
I don't think it was Bridget Phillipson's finest hour. She was sent out as a sort of government voice, and of course it's not her area of expertise. I mean, subsequently, you know, we've had the tweet from Steve Witkoff yesterday saying how instrumental Jonathan Powell has been. I mean, there's plenty of people would look and think that Britain hasn't done anything at all apart from recognise Palestine as a state, along with many other countries which
was not really
don't
helpful,
really
was it?
think would have influenced Netanyahu very much. But look, the government say they are working behind the scenes. They're very keen to big up Jonathan Powell and also this 20-point plan of Trump's. Has Tony Blair been involved? We don't know. We know that he has been very involved. I think it's interesting that the Prime Minister really doesn't want to talk about Tony Blair. I was on the plane to India last week. We asked him how he would feel about Tony Blair being involved. He does not really want to discuss Tony Blair, I guess because he realises that Tony Blair, you know, the Iraq war is still quite a toxic legacy to many people. And I think let's see whether he does make it onto this board of peace.
I'm not sure he will. But Tony Blair, I mean, honestly, I don't know. I think after Iraq, I don't think he'll ever be forgiven for that somehow.
But he has spent the last 15 years in the Middle East building relationships with these Arab countries, you know, working with them. I mean, a huge part of this
yes,
is
but
that
you can do one thing very, very badly that people will never forget, and they won't allow you
I wonder if Tony Blair's less popular in this country than he is in just about any other country in the world.
Do you think, a bit like Keir Starmer?
A little bit.
Because he went off, where did he go when they had all his face and everything?
I think it's quite good that we've got, you know, a British voice on the board of, like, sort of one of the most senior people on this board. I think that's quite good for this country. If Tony Blair's booted off, there's probably not going to be a British voice on that board.
And certainly Tony Blair, you know, is not in government. He has the time, he has the experience. OK, you know, we know what happened with Iraq, and he told George W. Bush, we'll be with you, whatever, and we know everything that came from that. But up until that point, he was pretty successful. I mean, I agree that I think it's taken a long time for people to move beyond that, and I think a lot of people never will. But it's very interesting that President Trump and Tony Blair, who you would not put together at all, Donald Trump seems to rate him.
Well, interesting, but Donald Trump also appears to rate Keir Starmer, although I found it very awkward that Keir Starmer wouldn't say whether Donald Trump should get the Nobel Peace Prize and kind of talked around that. At least he could have, you know, inferred that perhaps he was worthy of it or something. But Keir Starmer did the whole sort of obfuscation thing again, which was not good.
Yeah, he was asked about that at the press conference in India, and I think he may have been asked about it subsequently, and he just said, oh, you know, it's not a decision for me. But, of course, Donald Trump wants the Nobel Peace Prize. It's one thing that money cannot buy. And maybe he should get it. Quite likely he will get it next time. But I think it is worth saying that just because we do have peace right at this moment, we have to hope it continues. But I think there's a very, very, very long way to go. And, of course, can he do this now with Russia and Ukraine?
Well, that is such an interesting point, because our reporter out in DC, Bev Turner, was the first of anyone to get wind of the idea that Volodymyr Zelensky is going to the White House on Friday. I mean, is this going to be part of this wider White House sort of swoop for peace, where on Monday they get it in the Middle East? Could they have something really to deliver by Friday? What is this White House meeting going to be about?
Well, I'll be astonished. But look, the president has clearly, let's say, been on a journey hasn't he? Because he's taking if you put Alaska and the red carpet and the applause of Putin to one side, he is taking a tougher stance, I think, largely influenced by Melania Trump, who we now know has been in contact with Putin about the thousands and thousands of Ukrainian children that have been abducted by Russia. But very recently, it's only a couple of weeks ago, Donald Trump was asked about, we've seen all these incursions of Russia, drones over Poland, drone interference in Denmark and many other places, Russian jets over Estonia. And Donald Trump was asked, if a Russian jet is over NATO airspace, should it be shot down? And he said yes.
Of course.
Which is, you know, and now discussions about possibly giving Tomahawk missiles to fire into Russia. I think it is a real shift. But, you know, this war has been... He thought he'd end it in a day, he thought he'd end it in a...
Well, this is the thing. I think he feels like he's been played by Putin.
Yeah.
He was initially taking what Putin said at face value. I think the thing about Donald Trump, strangely, is he likes to be friends with everyone.
Yeah.
For someone that has such a reputation around the...
No,
because people think of him as this sort of beastly man who's...
I don't think so.
But the thing is... But I think a lot of people do think of him as that around the world, when actually his default is to lavish praise on people. His default is to want to be friends with everyone. And perhaps that's where he's made an early misstep with Putin that he's now correcting for.
I think what he's done was the right thing. You go in warm, you get more with honey than vinegar. So he's gone in warm, he's very friendly to people, he's very personable, and hopefully he uses that charm to do the deal. When that doesn't work, then you get to see the other side. Now, Moscow have actually warned the White House that if he does provide Tomahawks, then there'll be no relationship with them at all. They'll sever ties to Washington, D.C. altogether.
Well, yes, and I mean, it would be a very risky strategy, not to mention the risk of very serious escalation. But I remember just over a year ago, I was in Washington when the Prime Minister went to meet Joe Biden, and all the talk then was of Storm Shadow missiles and them being given and authorised to use actually into Russia. That subsequently happened. Now, at the time, I remember saying Putin has said, you know, if these are fired into Russia, NATO will be at war with Russia and there will be very serious consequences. Those missiles were fired into Russia and nothing happened. But of course, you just don't know. You just don't know, do you?
Well, Catherine, do stay with us, and thank you very much for all of that. We're going to head to Downing Street now, because our political editor, Christopher Hope, has just been in a briefing with the Prime Minister's official spokesman. And Christopher, what's the government saying today?
Yeah, hi Tom, hi Nana. Well, it looks like the government is trying to draw a line under this row about the Chinese, alleged Chinese spies. Now, the Prime Minister is writing to Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the opposition, this hour. That should be sent later this today. We're hoping we'll see a copy of it today to make clear that in the government's view, the Labour government's view, it was the Tory government's fault for not labelling China an enemy or a current threat to national security sufficient for it to be deemed an enemy of the state during some different moments in the last government, the 2021 strategic review, the 2023 review, and a speech by former Foreign Secretary James Cleverly in April 2023. Because it wasn't called an enemy at the time, these charges against these two alleged Chinese spies, the two men of course deny that, spying that is, those charges, that's why the prosecution fell apart on the eve of the case. We've also had some remarks about the Deputy National Security Advisor Matthew Collins. He was preparing the witness statement. We're told by the Prime Minister he is one of our most respected securocrats who faithfully carried out his job. That was emphasised by the PM and other ministers in the Cabinet meeting today. Mr Collins provided the evidence he...
Sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt you. The Prime Minister's on his feet in the House of Commons.
Their way of life, their children need extra protection. We must also be crystal clear that while this was an attack on Jews because they were Jews, the Islamist extremism that motivated this sick individual is a threat to every citizen of this country, an attack on British values, British security, and the British decency that holds our communities together. Moreover, Mr. Speaker, we can see clearly that anti-Semitism is on the rise in Britain once again. So we will scale up the protection we provide for Jewish people. We will set out new measures to prevent hatred abusing the democratic right to protest. We will stop at nothing to root out anti-Semitism. And Mr. Speaker, the same applies to the arson attack on the Peacehaven Mosque. An attack on British Muslims is also an attack on us all. So we condemn this despicable crime and the poison of anti-Muslim hatred. We will fight against hate in all its forms. Mr. Speaker, let me now turn to the Middle East, and words I have longed to say in this House for a very long time. The surviving hostages are free. The bombardment of Gaza has stopped. And desperately needed aid is starting to enter as a result of the peace plan led by President Trump. We have the chance, and it is a chance, to bring a terrible chapter in history finally to a close. Mr. Speaker, it's a moment of profound relief for this House, for this nation, indeed for the whole world. But it is tempered, of course, by the knowledge that for the hostages and their families, for the loved ones of those killed on October the 7th, and for the innocent civilians in Gaza, the dead, the bereaved, the starving, this has been 2 years of living hell. I think of Avinatan Orr, who has family ties to the United Kingdom, returned at last to his family and to his girlfriend, Noah. Avinatan and Noah were taken from that music festival 2 years ago. The footage of their abduction, filmed by Hamas, evil, committed to camera. I've met Avinatan's family and heard for myself the agony that they suffered for 2 long years, waiting for him to come home. His frail condition, shocking evidence of the appalling treatment he must have endured. Mr. Speaker, we await the release of the deceased hostages. Those families need the chance to grieve, and so we demand that they return to their families immediately. Mr. Speaker, my thoughts are also with the people of Gaza, almost all of whom will have lost family members, husbands, wives, brothers, sisters, and of course, worst of all, sons and daughters. Over 20,000 children killed. I think of people like Yara Yagi, who I met a year ago, 17 years old. She was studying at college in Hertfordshire. She had lost 44 members of her family. 44. A pain that cannot be erased, even as we welcome the peace today. But, Mr. Speaker, mercifully, the killing and destruction has now stopped, and aid is beginning to enter Gaza. But, to be clear, we urgently need to see more aid and faster. All restrictions must now be lifted. The need for food, sanitation, healthcare and shelter are still acute. While the signing yesterday was historic, what matters now is implementation and getting help in as quickly as possible. The UK is providing £20 million in additional humanitarian support to get water, sanitation and hygiene products to tens of thousands of civilians across Gaza. That is in addition to the support that we're already providing. Our 2 field hospitals in Gaza have already seen 600,000 patients. And earlier this month, Mr. Speaker, we evacuated the 3rd group of sick and injured Palestinian children to the United Kingdom, and they are now being treated by the NHS. And we will work with the UN and our partners to go further and faster to provide the aid that is so desperately needed. And, Mr. Speaker, let no one be any doubt that none of this would have been possible without President Trump. This is his peace deal, delivered, of course, with President Sisi of Egypt, the Emir of Qatar, and President Erdogan of Turkey. Alongside our partners, we have also offered the UK's full support to these efforts. Mr. Speaker, we've worked behind the scenes for months with the US, Arab, and European nations to help deliver a ceasefire, get the hostages out, get aid in, and secure a better future for Israel, Gaza, and the West Bank. I am proud of our contribution. And Mr. Speaker, we are in a position to play this role precisely because of the approach this government takes. And Mr. Speaker, that does include our decision to recognise the state of Palestine, because this move, taken alongside our allies, France, Canada, Australia and others, helped lead to the historic New York Declaration, where for the first time the entire Arab League condemned the atrocities of October the 7th, urged Hamas to disarm, and crucially demanded that they end their rule in Gaza. But Mr. Speaker, let me be very clear. While we celebrate the relief of peace today, making that peace last will be no less difficult a task. Along with our allies, our absolute focus in the days and weeks ahead is the relentless implementation of this peace plan. That is no small challenge. And so we stand ready to deploy our diplomacy and expertise in 3 key areas. First, to support the reconstruction of Gaza. It is an immense task. The devastation defies description, and it will require a truly international effort. But we are ready to play our part, starting with a conference here in the United Kingdom this week, hosted by my honourable friend, the Minister for the Middle East. Second, to support transitional governance arrangements in Gaza. We will continue to work closely with the Palestinian Authority on the vital reforms that they need to make. And third, to help ensure security in Gaza through a ceasefire monitoring process, planning for the International Stabilisation Force. And, Mr. Speaker, drawing on our experience in Northern Ireland, we stand ready to play a full role in the decommissioning of Hamas weapons and capability. Because, as this House knows, there can be no viable future for Gaza, no security for Israel, if Hamas can still threaten bloodshed and terror. So we will work to put that threat out of action for good. Because, Mr. Speaker, this is the first real chance we've had at a 2-state solution since the Oslo Accords over 3 decades ago. So we are fully committed to this, because a safe and secure Israel, alongside a viable Palestinian state, is the only way to secure lasting peace for the Middle East. And I've been clear all along, Mr. Speaker, that must be our goal. So we will work now to follow through on the 20-point peace plan and deliver it in full, including by supporting a dialogue to agree on a political horizon for peaceful coexistence. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I want to update the House on my discussions with Prime Minister Modi last week in Mumbai. India is a growing force on the world stage, on track to have the 3rd largest economy by 2028. So, in addition to the bond we already share, the living bridge of family and history, we are also united by the future and the incredible opportunities that we see before us. That's why back in July we signed a historic trade deal, opening up new opportunities for British businesses in India. And that's why last week I led the biggest British trade delegation to India ever. We announced that more British universities are opening campuses in India, making us their leading international education provider. We're deepening the UK-India Technology Security Initiative to boost opportunities for our brilliant tech sector. And we announced new deals and investment, including in advanced manufacturing, defence, car production, and Bollywood filmmaking here in the United Kingdom. These investments into the United Kingdom are worth £1.3 billion, and, Mr. Speaker, they will create 10,600 jobs. This is real change that people will see in their communities up and down the country. I set this out, Mr. Speaker, because it again speaks to our approach on the world stage, as do our deals with the United States and the EU, and the approach we bring to crises and conflicts as well. Because instead of threatening to walk away or indulging in the cheap political theatre that comes from castigating our allies that we need to deliver peace and economic stability in a dangerous, volatile world, we stay in the room, we trust in diplomacy, and we back the reputation, talent and pride of this country to change the world to the benefit of the British people. A politics of national renewal that works with our partners rather than against them, that solves problems rather than exploits them, and that believes our openness to the world is what helps us take control of our future, rather than shutting the door and hoping for the best. That is how this government delivers for Britain, Mr. Speaker, and I commend this statement to the House.
Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Badenoch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm grateful to the Prime Minister for advance sight of his statement. I remember almost 2 years ago meeting 3 mothers whose children had been stolen from them on October 7th and held captive in terror tunnels. They were living a nightmare unimaginable for any parent. Many of us on these benches have met hostages, their families, heard their stories, and supported them. Yesterday, it was truly momentous to finally see the return of the 20 living hostages who are now back home in Israel after over 730 days in terrorist captivity. Hostages released yesterday showed superhuman endurance in the face of evil, and we send every best wish to them and their families as they begin the process of rebuilding their lives. Yeah. We also mourn those hostages killed by Hamas and continue to call for all their bodies to be returned to their families. Mr. Speaker, we must never forget what happened on the 7th of October 2023. The abduction of men, women, and children was a calculated cruelty to break body, mind, and soul after inflicting the mindless horror of rape and murder. There is no cause, no grievance that can ever justify what happened that day. I, for one, will never forget. And the response from some in the West, the equivocation, the indulgence in whataboutery, and the drawing of false equivalence shows how far moral clarity has eroded. And we have got a job to do here at home, Mr. Speaker, to fix this. So on these benches, we stand alongside Israel in our shared fight against Islamist terror. Yeah. The conflict could have ended a long time ago if the hostages had been returned. So many Palestinian lives have been needlessly lost because of this war. Mr. Speaker, Hamas is a genocidal terrorist organization. A sustainable end to the suffering of civilians in Gaza means the complete eradication of Hamas and the dismantling of its terrorist infrastructure. Even now, we know that Hamas is still killing Palestinians in Gaza. The initial phase of the US-backed peace plan represents a significant breakthrough. I want to thank the US administration, President Trump, and regional mediators for having secured this outcome. They put in the hard yards and found solutions, making clear that all progress would depend on the release of the hostages, a condition that some other governments forgot. Yeah. Mr. Speaker, with this peace deal, there is much to be hopeful for in the Middle East. If the Abraham Accords are expanded, a new age of peace will have arrived. We will see diplomatic normalization of Israel with the Arab world, something many of us have longed to see. And it saddens me that the Prime Minister's statement does not appear to show that the UK was at the heart of any of these efforts specifically. it is quite clear that UK relations with Israel have been strained by the actions of this government. Their view, and they have stated publicly, is that it looks like under pressure from his own backbenchers, the Prime Minister has taken the wrong decisions, time and time again, diminishing our influence in the region. They can shout shame as much as they want to, Mr. Speaker. Within weeks of Labour coming into power, they decided to restore funding to UNRWA. We haven't forgotten. An organisation, they say yes, that's an organisation whose members assisted in the kidnapping of these hostages, the release which we are celebrating today. Relations with Israel have been so damaged that when Israel launched strikes against Iran, a country that has been a direct threat to us for years, the UK was out of the loop. They may not like it, but it is the truth. And then, in a move praised by Hamas, Labour decided to recognise a state of Palestine with no condition to release the hostages still held in the tunnels of Gaza, rewarding terrorism. They may chanter from a sedentary position. I will remind them of what the former British-Israeli hostage, Emily Damari, said. She called it a moral failure. I'm surprised to hear the Prime Minister say in his statement that it was a contribution to this peace deal. We all know that the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, condemned this recognition, saying it had made ceasefire negotiations harder. That is what the US said. The truth is, as historic events have unfolded in the Middle East, Britain has been out of step with the US. The US ambassador to Israel even called the government's claim that it played a key role in the ceasefire delusional, something Israeli foreign ministers agreed with. Mr. Speaker, I welcome the Prime Minister's promise to scale up protection for Jewish people in our country. Britain has always been a sanctuary for British Jews. But after the tragic murder of 2 British Jews outside a synagogue in Manchester, the government must now do everything it can to eradicate anti-Semitism. The anti-Israel protesters who have turned our streets into theatres of hate have been relatively silent about the good news of a ceasefire and hostage return, showing us their real motivation. The Prime Minister mentioned in his statement the Palestinian Authority. Can he tell us whether the government's preference for the Palestinian Authority to take the reins in Gaza, if they have committed to end the pay-for-slay policies that reward families of terrorists for killing Israelis? Will it deal with anti-Semitism in education, and are they demonstrating any democratic progress? Mr. Speaker, there are also domestic implications. We need to strengthen our borders. Hamas is still running Gaza. Those who would be allowed to leave can only do so with Hamas's approval. We should not be bringing anyone to Britain with links to extremism, anti-Semitism, or to Hamas and other terrorists. So can the Prime Minister confirm whether he intends to bring people from Gaza to study, for healthcare, or for other purposes? And what measures are in place to ensure we are not importing extremism, anti-Semitism, or anyone linked to Hamas and other terrorists? Mr. Speaker, Britain is a great country and still a powerful one. We still have agency to shape the world around us. The government must do better and show it has the backbone to use Britain's power to make a better world.
Can I thank her for the words she said about the hostages just a moment ago, and I know how heartfelt they are. I was surprised and saddened that she spent more time attacking what we actually did to help the process than even mentioning the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, without setting out in terms the number of people that have been killed, that are starving, been subjected to denial of aid, when the immediate task for any serious government is to work with allies to get that aid in at speed. I would have expected at least an acknowledgement of that terrible situation. It shows yet again just how far her party has slid from serious statesperson approach to diplomacy. This is not the time for a fight about what role any individual played. I am proud of what Steve Witkoff said about our National Security Advisor. He was negotiating this. He knows absolutely the role we played. And this House should be proud that we played that role. We played that role only because of the relationship that this government has with the Trump administration. We are a trusted partner working both before this peace deal and afterwards. And yes, I did discuss recognition of Palestine with President Trump when he was over here. That's what grown-up, responsible partners do, unlike the discussion here. And I'd stand by my words that the first time in New York was the first time that other countries in the region were clear in their condemnation of Hamas. That was a key and important aspect of what has now happened. In relation to her questions, she will know from the reforms that have already been committed to that the Palestinian Authority and any elections will not tolerate any election of individuals or parties that are not committed to a peaceful process. That is an absolute red line. It is part of the agreement. It's what we've been talking to other allies about for a very, very long time. On healthcare cases, yes, as I reported, we have had healthcare cases coming to the United Kingdom and students, and of course we're extremely careful in the checks that we carry out on everybody that comes to this country. But I return, Mr. Speaker, to the fact that this is a historic deal. It is important for the region. It is important for the world. It is to be celebrated across this House because of the relief it brings to the hostages and their families in particular, and to the many thousands of people in Gaza. And I was, as I say, surprised and saddened that she overlooked what to me is a really important part of the resolution of this conflict.
Chair of the International Development Committee, Sir Richard.
Well, we've been listening there to the Prime Minister and indeed the Leader of the Opposition speak about the Middle East peace settlement. The Prime Minister, of course, was over in Sharm el-Sheikh yesterday and had a brief meeting with the US President that perhaps was slightly awkward in part.
Well, joining us now, Catherine Forster. Catherine, your reaction to all of that?
Well, first of all, he said it was Donald Trump's peace deal, which it clearly is. But I thought it was interesting how he did go on to say, I'm proud of our contribution. So he is saying, look, we absolutely have played a part. He said that we worked behind the scenes for months, and also that he totally stands by the decision that the government made to recognise Palestine as a state, along with countries like France, like Canada, like Australia. Of course, that's had a lot of criticism because fundamentally, does Benjamin Netanyahu care what Britain might say about what effect did it have? Was it a reward for terrorism? Other people will say, look, it was the sort of the stick, if you like. It helped to put the pressure on Israel to come to an agreement. But, you know, they say they're ready to play their part in terms of reconstruction, in terms of transitional arrangements, and also in terms of ceasefire monitoring.
Yeah, we spoke to some people yesterday who were sort of on the Israeli side of this, who said, if anything, recognising Palestine from their perspective emboldened Hamas, delayed the peace process by maybe 3 months.
Well, I mean, you can argue it both ways, and certainly you can seriously say it looked like a reward to Hamas for this. But we were not alone, were we? There were many other countries, and it was done in a very coordinated fashion. We had the announcement. We knew it was coming from our Prime Minister, and similarly, at a similar time, from Canada, from Australia, from lots of countries. But we heard Kemi Badenoch there basically saying, you did this for party political reasons. You did this because you were under pressure from your backbenchers, many of whom that feel that you haven't been tough enough, and that it was about placating backbenchers rather than that it was the right thing to do.
All right, Catherine Forster, thank you very much. And we're joined now by hostage advocate Emily Cohen, live from Israel. Emily, you might be hearing all this wonderful peace deal. It's all done. It's kind of in the bag. But there is something. 24 of the hostages' remains have not been returned. And, you know, it is wonderful that 20 have been returned alive, but I mean, I don't know, but you may be feeling that actually the deal hasn't been done as agreed.
I would just like to say that in the Jewish religion, you can't actually spiritually move on until a body is buried. So the fact that there are 24 bodies still to be returned is tragic. Putting that aside for 1 second, being here in Israel and being part of the incredible day yesterday where we saw 20 hostages being returned in one go, it was honestly the most incredibly euphoric, unbelievable, like just incredible moment of my life and a lot of other people's lives. I was in Hostage Square in Tel Aviv when it happened, watching it all in real time. I don't know if you guys saw what we saw in Israel, but we actually had a split screen. And at the same time of Air Force One landing, you saw a convoy of the white UN trucks driving. It was incredible. It was kind of the greatest show on earth. It was really, really an incredible day. There were many, many thousands of people in Hostage Square. Everyone was just weeping and laughing and crying. Yes, it was bittersweet because as you've mentioned and I've mentioned, there are still hostage bodies that have not been returned. But for us to see 20 living hostages be returned in one go was just, it was unbelievable. I think it was something that many of us never, ever thought we'd see. It was really, really an incredible moment in history. It felt like we were in the epicenter of the universe yesterday, really, with Trump and the hostage families, and it was just incredible.
We were absolutely transfixed looking at those pictures of Hostage Square, which we stuck on live for hours yesterday, just looking at sort of those pictures. And the one moment when one of the hostages clearly had asked to see people before he was going to hospital, and driving by in that van, seeing those pictures, just the most remarkable. Does it feel in some sense like closure after 2 long years?
I mean, all I can say is that now it's a country that can begin to heal. It has felt that people have just been holding their breath. People have been sort of half living. And now that the living hostages are home, I think that this is the beginning of a whole new chapter for Israel, for the Israelis, for the hostage families. You know, it's we're going to see a very different Israel now. Thank God for Trump. Really, thank God for Trump. He's like been the Israel Messiah to have done what he's done. Everyone here is feeling that. And I think, you know, people can really breathe now and begin to heal.
All right, Emily Cohen, thank you very much. She's live from Israel. Well, joining us now is the editor-at-large of the Tribune, Carl Hansen. Carl, welcome to the programme.
Carl, I wonder, given what Emily just said then about Trump being some sort of messiah, received as a sort of messiah in Israel, the bringer of peace, what do you make of that?
Well, it's true that Trump's the person who was responsible for securing this ceasefire and the hostage exchange. But this deal has been on the table for 2 years, and Israel's been rejecting it. President Biden did nothing to bring about a ceasefire, and Donald Trump permitted the genocide to continue for 9 months. So, of course, we should welcome that Trump finally picked up the phone and told Netanyahu that he has to accept a ceasefire deal. But I don't think that he deserves a tremendous amount of credit for taking so long to do this.
If you just you refer to it as a genocide, but it wasn't, was it? I mean, it was a war. If you were committing genocide, would you send out flyers to warn people as to where you were bombing? Would you supply aid? Would you do all those things? I think it's a little bit disingenuous to call it that. It was a war, which many people died, which is awful. But what is your definition of a genocide?
There's an internationally agreed definition of a genocide, and the United Nations and the consensus of genocide scholars around the world is that Israel was committing a genocide in Gaza. And I think that on this issue, you have to defer to people who are experts, who know what they're talking about, rather than partisans who love Israel and would deny and apologise for just about any crime it commits.
I mean, I can see why people would be saying this had Israel annexed Gaza. Had they genuinely wanted to go in and wipe out Gaza from the face of the planet. And I think, I mean, there are some extremists in Israel who do want to do that, who have advocated that. There's one in the cabinet.
Well, as are people from Hamas who specifically wanted to wipe out the Jewish people.
But isn't the proof that that didn't happen the fact that it didn't happen? The fact that when this deal was on the table, it was Israel that signed up to it first, and it was a week later that Hamas finally signed up to it.
Yeah.
I mean, surely that way round would suggest that actually the sticking point might have been Hamas all along.
Well, the internationally agreed legal definition of genocide is to destroy a people in whole or in part, and likely maybe 200,000 Palestinians have been killed. 80% of the buildings in Gaza have been destroyed. There's been a relentless targeting of hospitals and civilian infrastructure. So it very does much meet that internationally agreed definition. And to the point about was it Hamas that were holding this up? No, I don't believe it was, because the deal that was secured this week has been on the table for 2 years and Israel would not agree to it. The deal.
So are you saying? So, Carl, it sounds like you support Hamas and you think that they're OK and it wasn't really much to do with them, it's all Israel's fault. Is that where we're going with this?
No, the point I just made is that the deal has been on the table for 2 years. Hamas agreed to a ceasefire, the exchange of hostages, in return for Israel withdrawing its forces from Gaza. That deal's been on the table from since November 2 years ago, and Israel only now agreed to it.
The deal on the table in November 2 years ago was never that Hamas would demilitarise Gaza. I mean, that's what's been agreed here, that Gaza gets demilitarised. Israel's red lines have always been hostages handed over, Hamas out of power and demilitarised. They never offered the second half of that equation until just now.
Well, there's a nuance to this, and Hamas has long said that it would be prepared to give up its arms, but only if it was giving its arms to the military authority for a new Palestinian state. That's been Hamas's position for years. So this isn't a new thing that's only been sort of agreed or forced upon Hamas in the past few weeks or months of negotiation. It's a longer-standing policy of Hamas, and I would be sceptical.
But of course, there's not a Palestinian state to hand over to the militia of. It's going to be a board of peace, isn't it?
That's right. Listen, Carl, we'd love to get you on to talk longer. We do have to go for a break. We're legally obliged to do that, but it's really good to talk to you. That's Carl Hansen. He's the editor-at-large at the Tribune.
Well, so much more to come here on Good Afternoon Britain. But in the meantime, if you're in search of some holiday sunshine, here's the weather in Europe.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Whilst the UK enjoys some settled, albeit cloudy weather this week, it's going to be increasingly wet on Wednesday in Sardinia and Corsica. Also some patchy rain moving into Madeira, 1 or 2 showers for the Canary Islands, but a lot of fine weather for Iberia at the moment, having seen this low move away. But that's the low bringing some very lively thunderstorms on Wednesday to Sardinia and Corsica, eventually moving through southern Italy into Greece as well, turning things unsettled later this week.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I've got dressed up as a pilot sitting in an actual real-life Spitfire. This is not just a simulator, this is a real-life Spitfire that's been kitted out to do simulations here at the Spitfire Centre in Blackpool. John Puttock joins us now. You're the engineering lead here, and this is quite a fancy bit of kit, and really, I guess, you know, lets people experience what those pilots would have done 85 years ago.
Absolutely. This aeroplane, you know, is part of the hangar display here at Blackpool, and Andy Harper, our specialist, actually put this aeroplane together and has enabled it to act and behave exactly like a real aircraft would. And you know, it's available to the public to come up and have a go and see if they can fly a Spitfire.
And tell us about the significance of this aircraft 85 years ago, the Battle of Britain. Things start to turn in Britain's favour.
Absolutely. This is a Mark V Spitfire. Early days they were using the Mark II, and that aircraft had 8 Browning machine guns firing 303 bullets. This Mark V actually incorporated some 20mm Hispano cannons, and so gave the aircraft a lot more punch and enabled it to be more successful.
And I've got all of this gear on. A lot of it is kind of fur and real thermal stuff. That's because the temperature up there at the height, at the altitude that they were flying, was absolutely freezing.
Absolutely. I mean, the higher you go, then obviously the colder it gets. But if you're at around about 25,000 feet, you're going to be experiencing temperatures of between -25 and 30. There is no heating in the aircraft, so from that point of view, the only way you're going to stay warm is to dress for it. So, as the Queen once said, there's no such thing as the wrong weather, it's just the wrong clothing.
The People's Channel.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m. only on GB News.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's just gone 10 to 2. Now, the Afghan migrant, the small boat migrant Fayez Khan, has been jailed for 5 years for threatening to kill Nigel Farage.
Now, that includes 8 months for entering the UK illegally. The small boat migrant shared videos of his journey to the UK online, alongside one video threatening to kill Nigel Farage.
Know me. I gonna come to England. I gonna pop, mother. Passa, man, you know. There's mother passa.
Well, let's speak to our national reporter, Will Godley, who was at the trial. At the sentencing. This is a really significant moment.
Yeah, significant, and came to a dramatic close at the sentencing today. Fayez Khan pleading his innocence as he heard he was sentenced to 5 years for threatening to kill Nigel Farage. He said he wanted to return to Afghanistan. He never came here to be violent, and that he claimed Nigel Farage was making an example out of him because Nigel Farage wanted to be Prime Minister. And as he was led away, we heard him professing his innocence in the corridors. We also understood understand at the sentencing today that Fayez Khan might not actually be his real name, known to authorities in Sweden as a man called Fayez Husseini. And Fayez Khan told Border Force when they intercepted his small boat on Halloween of last year that he gave them a different name to protect himself from his enemies. Well, the judge ruled it was actually to hide from an outstanding prison case, prison time in Sweden, where he was wanted to serve 6 months in prison. And he's known to have a prolific criminal past in Sweden, having 17 convictions over 5 years from 2019 to 2024. And the judge today ruled that that was a significant aggravating factor in coming up with his sentence. Likewise was the fact he made a threat against Nigel Farage, which she said was an extremely serious crime, making a threat against an MP, and that was why she came up with 5 years. Nigel Farage reacted outside court earlier on.
And the only reason we know about this guy is because somebody sent it to me on TikTok. And it makes me wonder, how many other Madder passers are there now in this country, or will there be as the boats continue to cross the channel? So I'm pleased with the judgment, but deeply, deeply concerned that the guy will be out free in 18 months.
Deeply concerned Nigel Farage speaking outside court earlier on. Fayez Khan, or Fayez Husseini, also sentenced to 8 months that will serve concurrently for coming to the UK illegally. We know that anyone sentenced to more than 12 months, the Home Office has an automatic right to be able to deport them, any foreign criminal, to deport them. No word as of yet whether they will deport Fayez Khan here, but the judge wanted to make sure that the sentence was a deterrent sentence to avoid anyone else making any similar threats to any other members of Parliament.
All right, Will Godley, thank you very much. This is Good Afternoon Britain. Lots more coming up on today's show. We'll be discussing why pro-Palestine celebrities haven't been more vocal in their support of Donald Trump's peace deal.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Box Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
Hello. Yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. The skies remain fairly grey for the vast majority. Most places, though, having another dry day and some spots seeing a little bit of sunshine. The fairly static weather patterns because of a chunky area of high pressure pretty much just sitting right over us, trapping that layer of cloud in, keeping the skies grey. That cloud is thick enough for a little bit of drizzly rain at times, particularly over parts of eastern England and northern Scotland, but across central and western Scotland, that's where we do have some good breaks in the cloud, some sunshine here, and maybe at times parts of southwest England and West Wales. But for many, it is just dull and on the coolish side. Temperatures 13, 14 degrees, but get a bit of sunshine because the winds are light. Feels quite pleasant with temperatures of 15 or 16 where it does brighten up. Northern Scotland's seeing more clouds and a few showers continuing to affect the Northern Isles in particular as we head into the evening time. But much of the mainland of Scotland will have largely clear skies through this evening. For Northern Ireland, I think mostly cloudy here, as it will be for England and Wales, but just some pockets, particularly in the west, perhaps in the southeast with a bit more breeze. But still that cloud thick enough, especially Lincolnshire, East Anglia, for a little bit of light rain and drizzle at times as the breeze continues in here. That'll be the pattern overnight as well, where we've got clear skies. It will turn a bit cold across western Scotland, maybe some mist and fog patches too, but most places just staying dry and cloudy. Breaks in the cloud could allow temperatures to dip down into single figures. Where it stays cloudy, we're looking at lows of 10 or 11 again, and it's a very similar story tomorrow. Again, thickest cloud across northern Scotland with a few showers over the Northern Isles. Thicker cloud in eastern parts of England with a bit of drizzly rain. Clearest skies, West Wales, southwest England and Scotland, where we will see some sunny spells. The vast majority, though, again, dry, but mostly cloudy, with temperatures struggling into the low teens.
Today, clouds overhead, total zen within. Box Solar sponsors the weather on GB News.
There's just 3 weeks left to see how you could be our biggest winner this year. First, you could be driving away with this brand new Benamar Primera motorhome. This luxury vehicle comfortably sleeps 4, has its own fitted kitchen and bathroom areas, and comes complete with fitted awning and bicycle rack. And that's not all, as we'll also give you a whopping £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. For another chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB16 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 31st of October. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Join me, Nana Akua, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Beth.
Hello everyone, Patrick Christie's here.
I'm Michelle Duke, Britain's news channel.
Access the stories that matter to you. Take the GB News family with you on any device. And as long as you have an internet connection, tune in to GB News anywhere on the planet or beyond. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Britain was once the envy of the world. But look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m. only on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Tuesday, October the 14th. I'm Nana Akua.
And I'm Tom Harwood. Well, it's bad news for Rachel Reeves. Unemployment is up again today. The joblessness rate is now the highest since lockdown, and the wage growth has cooled off as well. With the highest inflation in the G7, Britain could be in a world of hurt in next month's budget.
A war over the Union flag is dividing Faversham as Raise the Colour protesters do battle with anti-racism activists.
Meanwhile, the Home Secretary has claimed some pro-Palestine protesters don't want peace, as protests on our streets are planned to continue despite the peace agreement. We ask, why do Palestine advocates refuse to acknowledge the ceasefire?
And could the NHS begin screening all men between the ages of 50 and 69 for prostate cancer? A new campaign backed by the former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says that the move could save money and lives by catching the most common cancer in men early.
Some really grim economic news today. Let's just re-emphasise this for a second. The highest unemployment since lockdown, since COVID.
Yeah, it is, well, for the last 4 years, isn't it, that she's somehow we've managed to destroy what was there. I mean, it's probably not all Rachel Reeves' fault, but there are some things that she's done that are completely nonsensical, like the raise in national insurance for employers, which would only mean that the employer will employ fewer people, which could be partly one of the reasons why the unemployment figures have risen. in such a moment and so quickly, especially over the last 3 months as well. We've seen another hike in them as well, so it's obvious.
I was speaking to the CEO of UK Hospitality around a week ago, and he was telling me it was around 100,000 jobs have gone in hospitality. And the curious thing about this is you can actually map this directly to the budget, because jobs in hospitality were going up. There was a recovery from the pandemic. Payroll employment was rising and rising and rising. The last budget happened, and then those jobs started going down month on month on month, because it's so much more expensive to employ someone now, particularly someone on part-time work, on low wages, because the national insurance rise wasn't just a rise in the rate, it was a drop in the threshold.
And we're also set to have the highest inflation on the G7 for 2025 and 2026. And in fact, the job figure, so the hike, it was 4.7% unemployment rate, and then within 3 months it went up to 4.8. And I'm wondering when the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, is going to own this and acknowledge that this particular phase is because of her policies.
Yes, and Nana, just to reiterate what you just said, this is new data coming out today, just breaking news now, from the International Monetary Fund, that the United Kingdom will be having the highest inflation of any advanced economy, of any major advanced economy over the course of the next year. I mean, that is a damning indictment of our financial situation. We're going to have a lot more on this with our political correspondent in just a moment's time. But, of course, we want your views as well. gbnews.com/your say is the way to get involved. We'll get to all of that and so much more after your latest news headlines.
Tom, thank you. The top story. Sir Keir Starmer says the Gaza peace plan was not possible without President Trump. He says the UK has offered its full support for Trump's plan and is proud of the British contribution so far. But he also acknowledges that making that peace last will be no less difficult a task and that implementing the peace plan is no small challenge. Mr Starmer went on to call for any restrictions on aid to be ended. That's as the last 20 surviving Israeli hostages were finally reunited with their families, ending 2 years in Hamas captivity. In exchange, nearly 2,000 Palestinian detainees were released under President Trump's historic peace accord. Mr. Trump said he hopes the peace agreement signed at the global summit in Egypt will lead to the rebuilding of Gaza.
And after so many years of unceasing war and endless danger, today the skies are calm, the guns are silent, the sirens are still, and the sun rises on a holy land that is finally at peace, a land and a region that will live, God willing, in peace for all eternity.
Sir Keir Starmer has this afternoon welcomed the release of hostages by Hamas, as he said he hoped President Trump's peace plan would bring 2 years of living hell for victims to an end.
As a result of the peace plan led by President Trump, we have the chance, and it is a chance, to bring a terrible chapter in history finally to a close. Mr. Speaker, it's a moment of profound relief for this House, for this nation, indeed for the whole world. But it is tempered, of course, by the knowledge that for the hostages and their families, for the loved ones of those killed on October the 7th, and for the innocent civilians in Gaza, the dead, the bereaved, the starving, this has been 2 years of living hell.
Let's cross live now to Washington, D.C., and we've just had that breaking news in the last few minutes.
There's also the flip side of the boom. Markets could reprice sharply. This would reduce wealth, consumption and investment, lower activity, and could spill over to broader financial conditions. Second, there are continued concerns about China's growth model. The bubble in the property sector remains a source of weakness. Growth in recent years has come from exports, but it is increasingly hard to see how this could be sustained, and the economy remains uncomfortably close to a debt deflation trap. The pivot towards investment in strategic sectors such as electric vehicles or solar panels through the use of large-scale subsidies has delivered significant gains in these sectors. But it may also have contributed to a broader misallocation of resources, as indicated by the lack of aggregate productivity gains. Our work highlights that industrial policy can indeed boost production in targeted sectors and sometimes productivity, but it brings significant fiscal and hidden costs and potential negative spillovers. Third, in too many countries, insufficient progress has been made to rebuild fiscal space. The situation remains precarious, with lower growth, higher real interest rates, elevated debt levels, and new spending needs such as defense, economic security, or climate adaptation. Low-income countries are even more vulnerable as they face the prospect of reduced aid flows from richer countries. The lack of growth prospects could morph into social unrest, particularly among unemployed youth. Fourth, as fiscal constraints become more binding, we are seeing rising pressures on central banks. Calls to ease monetary policy, whether to support activity or reduce government debt service at the expense of price stability, always backfires. Trust in central banks helps anchor inflation expectations, and this credibility needs to be protected. As trust erodes, inflation and inflation expectations always rise, macroeconomic stability deteriorates, and everyone loses out. This is a lesson that countries, advanced and emerging alike, have learned the hard way. Let's not forget it. While these risks are serious, all is not gloomy. A few important developments could quickly brighten the outlook. First and foremost, resolving policy uncertainty with clearer bilateral and multilateral trade agreements and lower tariffs can help boost output in the near term. Second, AI has the potential to increase productivity. Many of us are already using it, and we can attest to its benefits. Improved domestic policies will also go a long way to help improve resilience, reduce macroeconomic risks, and help resolve global imbalances. Restoring fiscal space where needed, improving the efficiency of public spending, ensuring independent, transparent, and tailored monetary policy, and above all, adopting government policies that invest in the future and empower private entrepreneurs to innovate and thrive. Thank you.
Thank you, Pierre-Olivier. So before we open the floor to your questions, some in-flight rules so we avoid any turbulence. First of all, if you want to ask a question, raise your hand, wait until we call on you.
Well, there we have it, live in Washington, D.C., the presentation of the IMF's World Economic Outlook, and it's bad news for Britain, the highest inflation in the G7. Let's get some immediate reaction in the studio with our political correspondent, Catherine Forster.
Yes, bad news for Britain indeed. The government have said that growth is its #1 mission. Growth projections are 1.3% this year. That's up from 1.2, but it's not a lot, is it? Let's face it. And for next year, down to 1.3. So for a government that said it's all about growth, these are pretty anemic numbers, and even more worrying, perhaps, in terms of the cost of living crisis, is inflation is going to be the highest in the G7, the group of the most advanced economies, both this year and next. So projected 3.5% this year, 2.5% next. It's currently at 3.8, and a lot of that is driven by food and hospitality. And, business leaders will say that that has been partly driven by choices that the government made in the last budget in terms of national insurance rises for employers, and particularly, as you mentioned, lowering the threshold at which employers have to pay national insurance, that's hit jobs at the bottom, really. And then, of course, we also had the jobs figures earlier that show that unemployment is up. So it's gloomy news. I mean, Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, is saying for too many people, our economy feels stuck. I think that's absolutely correct. I mean, you could also say the British economy has been pretty stuck, really, since the financial crisis. We've had precious little growth. And she says, I am going to deal with it. Well, easier said than done. The Shadow Chancellor, Mel Stride, has said that these figures are grim reading, says that families are squeezed from all sides. I think many people will feel like that. And he said that the government should be getting spending under control. We know they're very short of money. They tried to cut $5 billion off the welfare budget, and their own MPs back in the summer simply wouldn't wear it. So they're trying to get growth. There's not much money around. We've got a national debt at over $100 billion a year. We're paying just on the interest. it's very difficult. And, of course, all against a backdrop of November the 26th, the budget coming probably around £30 billion of tax rises.
Now, this is really difficult for the Chancellor because, of course, she keeps saying that, well, there are international problems, headwinds around the world. But this is an international comparison. Sure, everyone might be struggling right now, but we're struggling the most.
Yes, we are. And globally, the growth figure is set to be about 3%. Now, other countries are having a tough time too, and it is fair that Labour had a very difficult inheritance that they came in to. But, you know, in a way, the Tories laid a trap for them. They cut 4p off the rate of national insurance, trying to basically get people to vote for them. I don't think they were given any credit for that. But that made the position that Labour inherited even harder. And because they'd pledged that they wouldn't, you know, increase national insurance, as it turns out now, on employees is what they meant, or VAT or income tax. It's meant that they have disproportionately hit certain groups. You know, £25 billion of tax rises on businesses with those NI raids have had a pretty dreadful effect.
All right, Catherine Forster, thank you very much. Joining us now is the former head of the government's economic service, Vicky Price. Vicky, can we fairly say that actually it is some of the policies, and in fact many of the policies of the Labour government, that have brought us to this place? Even though I know they were given a bad inheritance, there are suggestions that some of the things they have done have brought us to where we are now.
A certain amount of that, I think, is absolutely true. I mean, we've already been discussing the national insurance contributions increase. We knew from the beginning that firms were going to start putting prices up. They were also going to pay less in terms of increases in wages than would otherwise have been the case. So they were also going to reduce their hirings. All these things seem to be happening exactly as had been anticipated. We've seen, therefore, slightly higher inflation here than elsewhere. We've seen unemployment rise. Actually, the figures for the last month, which was August, we're already showing unemployment at over 5%. So although the average was below that, nevertheless, things are getting worse. So the question is, you know, what can be done on the inflation front? And a lot of the discussion, of course, has been, you know, you get faster growth, you get productivity to improve, you get AI to be used a little bit more, and that will sort of get your growth, and you're not going to get the inflation with it, particularly if some of the factors that we've seen so far prove to be transitory. And remember, it isn't just the NIC increase. It's also the increases that we saw in April in a number of areas, whether it's water bills, whether it is what you pay to license your car, to drive, your postal stamps, transport's gone up, and mobile phones, all these sort of things which are completely domestically induced because we allow particular formulas to work in a certain way. They may perhaps ease, but going back to the IMF, just very quickly, given the inflation forecast that they're making, this is no surprise because everyone's been forecasting that anyway. And even the Bank of England is forecasting an increase happening in the short term, and then it's falling back to more or less around target towards the end of 2026. We need to get a little bit of hope coming from that, because of course we're going to have interest rate decisions being made, and I think that's what people are looking for, waiting for those interest rates to come down, which have happened, but very slowly.
This will probably delay interest rate cuts. This will probably mean that whilst inflation is significantly above target, we don't get those interest rate cuts at the rates we were perhaps expecting half a year ago.
Well, I'm afraid so, but I think the Bank of England has sort of lost confidence in itself. It should have cut rates a lot earlier. Remember, we did actually hit target some time ago, about 6 months ago. In fact, we're even slightly below. So we have been able to manage it. But as I said, some of these domestic increases that we've seen are transitory. So if the Bank of England had any faith in its own forecasts, which bring inflation down to target, they would be cutting rates in the next meeting.
Vicky, I wanted to ask you, what does this mean for the budget next month? We know that there are all sorts of, frankly, ludicrously large numbers being thrown around by all sorts of economists in terms of how big is this black hole that Rachel Reeves will have to fill. Now, of course, a black hole doesn't just mean you can do tax rises, you could also do spending cuts, but there will be a black hole beyond Rachel Reeves' fiscal rules, and we are expecting her to fill it with tax rises rather than spending cuts. How painful could this be?
Oh, it could be quite painful, but of course, she has said she's not going to increase it on working people, whatever that means. But what she can do is extend. So the rate, yes, can stay as it is, but she can extend the application of some of those taxes to many more things.
Like VAT?
Yes, absolutely. But also she can extend national insurance contributions to incomes that people are getting right now when they're not actually charged national insurance contributions. This includes, of course, possibly pensioners. It includes income from other sources, dividends payments, all those which don't at present get NIC added to them. So she could get some more of that. She could do something with capital gains tax. She could raise that further. Of course, businesses will scream, but also it will affect individuals who may want to be putting money into enterprises. So there is that as well. But there are quite a lot of things that perhaps can be done.
Is it realistic that she could, because she said she's not going to cut any public spending, could she recoup much in public spending if she was to do that? And is it reasonable? Because she hasn't mentioned that at all. She's not, in fact, refusing to do that.
Well, she could, but of course, a lot of the commitments that have been made have been to the National Health Service. I mean, it is worth reminding everybody that one of the reasons why we're in the situation we're in is because the government has decided to spend an awful lot more than what the Conservatives had said they were going to spend, about 70 billion more a year in the budget last year, by comparison to what the March 24 budget had in it. That's huge. It means borrowing an awful lot of money, 30 billion more a year. It means also raising taxes of about 40 billion a year. That's what they needed to do. If they are continuing with this type of spending, and also the investment spending that they intend to do, then that is a problem. They could cut some of that back. Some of those projects that they are embarking on could be scaled back. HS2 could be stopped. All sorts of things could be done if there was any will to really reduce, the amount of borrowing that's happening out there. And the Bank of England, of course, has not helped hugely by selling its own bonds, 100 billion a year. That, of course, means the markets find it harder to buy our debt in a way and expect higher rates. And that's why, of course, mortgage rates still remain so high.
Oh, it sounds so gloomy. Vicky Price, thank you very much. Really good to talk to you. That's Vicky Price. She's a former head of the government's economic service.
Oh, goodness me. I think we need a bit of a breather after all of that. Just doom and gloom. It's not going to be a fun next month, is it?
Well, I just feel that the Labour government have exacerbated things by some of the decisions they've made, and I just don't get it.
Well, shall we talk about flags?
Yeah.
Well, a Kent market town has become enveloped in a flag row, which has divided the citizens of Faversham.
Many self-proclaimed patriots have been hanging flags around the town, yet members of Kent's anti-racism network have taken it upon themselves to remove these flags, believing they have prejudice undertones.
Well, our very own presenter, Patrick Christie's, has found a street full of flags in Faversham. Good afternoon, Patrick. Oh, what a marvellous sight behind you. What's going on there?
So this might look to the untrained eye like a quiet part of southern England, but this cul-de-sac in this area around here is actually the epicentre of Britain's biggest flag war. Now, all over this little area, locals have been putting up St George's crosses and Union flags, and then in the dead of night, people have been coming and tearing them down. So this is a little cul-de-sac here where the locals have said, no, enough's enough, we're going to put our foot down. Let's meet them. Hello, everybody. How are you? You all right? Yeah. Thank you very much for joining us today. Could I just ask, I'll speak to you at the back first, sir, if that's OK. Yeah. Right, why do you all care so much about our flag? Why are you putting them up everywhere?
I think it's... well, we shouldn't be ashamed of our flag. Our country's got a brilliant history, and there's a lot of countries around that would love to have the same history that our country's got. We should not have our culture erased, and that's the way it's going at the moment.
Yeah, and there is an issue, a local issue, and we're going to be reporting on this later on my show, which is that there was a former care home used to house local elderly people that is now being used to house, they were told, child asylum seekers. I'll be honest with you, I have seen evidence literally today that they are not children, many of them, and it's also next to a primary school as well, and I know that that's got some people quite worked up, and this is an issue that's very close to your heart, isn't it, because you've got children at that school?
Yeah, I've got 4 young children at the school, and, it's just constant anxiety of we're dropping them at school where they're meant to be safe, but are they safe, Are these undocumented males next door, what are they doing? What is their purpose here, do you know what I mean? Like, my mum lives backed off to it, you know, and I don't trust my kids to walk from their house to the, you know what I mean, to anywhere on their own anymore.
Just in terms of the actual flag war aspect of it, you had a little picture that you wanted to show us. I'm hoping this shows up on the screen now. So you can see that there was the Union flag in this lady's back garden here, and then someone stuck something on your fence.
Yeah, they stuck a sticker on my back fence, basically stating, it says that we all bleed the same, stand up to prejudice and free Palestine, free country.
Right.
And, you know, I find that a bit of a threat.
So they've come to your house to stick that up because you, in your own property, have got a Union flag. Can I just come around this way as well, if that's all right? Now, so why? Some people are saying, aren't they? And this is why there's these flag wars, which is that, oh gosh, it's all prejudice. It's all really, there's an undercurrent of racism, etc. What would you say to that?
Definitely not. The Union flag exists as a symbol of unity of the United Kingdom. Our people, our British people, deserve to have a flag that represents them. We are flying them proudly, and we should fly them proudly. What other country in the world has this kind of chaos going on? It's a disgrace.
Yeah. Can I just say, this is your house, isn't it?
This is my flat, yeah. This is where I live.
Yeah. And you have decked it out. Why? I mean, there's even an England... Is that an England bucket hat?
Everything, mate. I'm British and I'm English, and that is my thing. And why shouldn't we?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, why should not? You know what I mean? It's a British.
You feel very strongly about it, and no one so far has tried to come to your house and take your flags down.
They take my flags down.
Don't swear.
More up. No,
there'll be more up. There'll be more up. I wonder where you were going with that then for a second. But look, just very quickly as well. People have been coming and taking them down at night. We've got more of this. We're going to be talking about it throughout the day here on my show as well. Thank you very much, everybody who's turned out today. You're going to be seeing a lot more of these people later on, 9 to 11 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
All right, Patrick, Christy, what's wrong? You can put a flag up on your own house.
Surely,
it's a Union flag. It's the
although if you live in a conservation area, the council will come after you. It's a nightmare. Patrick Christie, it's 9 o'clock. We'll be there. We'll be watching. Thanks indeed for joining us.
Yes, lots more coming up on today's show. We'll be discussing why pro-Palestine celebrities haven't been more vocal in their support of Donald Trump's Gaza peace deal.
Well, all of that and much more to come. You're with GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain deserves a newsroom that puts the facts and your voice first.
Well, and that's what you get on GB News. Lively debates, lively conversation.
And we're not afraid to hold power to account.
And each other. So join me, Andrew Pierce.
And me, Miriam Gates, for Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akua, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Bold. They are under no illusion.
Ray.
Are you a human trafficker?
Boundless. I've had enough of the nonsense, and I'm not afraid to say it.
Don't get this on the BBC. Every weeknight, I tear through the headlines. The smell of gasoline. Should we be worried about it? From Westminster madness to cultural war chaos. What I'm going to do now is they are throwing things out the car as we speak. Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Patrick Christie's tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
No matter the state it's in, this is our nation. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we have been, where we are going, and where we are with the people who set the direction. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock, only on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 26 minutes past 2. Now, since the conflict between Israel and Hamas began, many celebrities have been taking to social media to publicly condemn the Jewish state.
Yes, Javier Bardem, Dua Lipa and Bella Hadid are some of the famous names who have advocated for a free Palestine.
But after years of protesting, many of these celebrities remain silent in the wake of a successful ceasefire deal.
Why, oh why, I wonder. This calls to question, do celebrities actually want a free Palestine, or is this all just virtue signalling? Well, joining us now is Tim Deutscher. He's the Executive Director of Unleash Prosperity. Tim, what is it with these people? They're totally untouched, unrelated to what's going on, and they have this massive platform where they express a view, usually a little bit like that Hermione Granger, that was her name on the character, I can't remember, Emma Watson, and then suddenly things change and they go very quiet.
Well, first of all, don't take any sort of public policy advice or assume that somebody, just because they've been in a movie, has any sort of idea or knowledge of what's going on. But I'll start with that. But let's reframe this just slightly differently. I don't think they're happy because Israel still exists. Israel won the war. Israel is on top here. I truly believe that a lot of these people do not think Israel should exist. And therefore, they can protest against Israel. They can protest against the United States all they want. But I mean, you saw it. We just released almost 2,000 of their hardened criminals to get 20 hostages back. So I can't possibly imagine this has anything to do with these protests other than the fact that they are just straight up bummed that Israel is still in existence.
Maybe some of them are just a bit thick and don't really know what's going on. So they've just joined a bandwagon because they want to look like they're, you know, what's that word when people have a lot of empathy and they want to be on the right side of compassion in their minds?
Well, of course, that's what they are. I mean, again, their knowledge of what's actually happening is probably less than, how do you say it, an inch deep on this matter. And so what they do is they put on the scarf, they put on, they hold the signs, they go out to the protests. You know, they may actually get paid to show up some places. Who knows? I'm not saying they are, but they may. And then they just spout the talking points that they're given from the very, very far left radicals who are driving this anti-Israel, anti-U.S. hatred in the region. And guess what? Yesterday at the signing ceremony, you saw Arab nations from all across the Middle East joining with President Trump saying, we're in for peace. We are not going this radical leftist route. We're with you. We're not with them. So this was a huge loss, and no wonder why they are not celebrating.
This is going to be really, really interesting for a lot of people sort of looking forward. I mean, if this deal really does... And of course, we're at the first stage of this deal. Things could fall apart. Absolutely true. Let's take that as read. But if all of these steps do take place, if Gaza is rebuilt with Arab money, if the Trump plan for a Gaza Riviera rears its head in the coming decade or so, sort of new skyscrapers, Dubai style, you know, Abu Dhabi 2.0. I mean, if that really does take place, do you think people will have a bit of contrition, will look back and think, maybe I was wrong?
Well, I mean, again, let's remember, this is probably 5% of the population here in the U.S. and maybe the same abroad as well. So here's the bottom line. If people start putting their money where their mouth is and saying, look, I want in on rebuilding Gaza. Again, this is going to be maybe a $50 billion rebuilding project in addition to all the cool things that President Trump put out in that AI video of turning it into the Riviera. This is a huge opportunity for people who love this region and have things invested in this region to double down and say, we're not going to stop here. We're going to actually be all in on this. And watch as these people, as long as they're freed from Hamas, watch them come alongside and join in the prosperity that could potentially come. And like you said, there's a lot to go here. There's a lot of room to go here.
They'll be right there at the Riviera of the Middle East. They'll be the first ones to buy an apartment there. But the thing is, though, what has happened is that 2,000 prisoners, many of which are murderers, some of them are rapists and so have been released. Is this what these people are cheering for? You know, because that's part of the deal.
Yeah, it was part of the deal. And this really is going to be the crux of it. And it's going to be Israel watching. Remember, Israel hasn't fully withdrawn from everything. They still are monitoring. They are still watching. I would trust the Israelis to know exactly who those people are, where they're going, what they're doing, who they're interacting with. So we have to understand that there is that intelligence play that's going on right now. But I think, look, they got the deal done at this point. They can monitor them. But really what's going to be crucial here is Hamas is no longer, they've said, we're not going to be in control of government. But what they haven't done is they haven't laid their weapons down. And we know how they work. We know that weapons are power. So if they don't lay those down, look, this is not going to be going anywhere. And no government, no matter Tony Blair or whoever comes in to be the international oversight, it's not going to work if those weapons aren't laid down. This is a huge thing to pursue.
Well, in 1997, Tony Blair introduced gun control in this country, so perhaps he'll be able to do it in Gaza as well.
Good luck with
Maybe
that.
That's facetious of me. There's a long way to go, but Tim, thanks indeed for joining us and talking through this peculiar story, Tim Doshebert in the United States.
Right, well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Lots more coming up on today's show.
Yes, could the NHS begin screening all men between the ages of 50 and 69 for prostate cancer? Well, it's a new campaign backed by the former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, and people do argue it could save money and lives by catching that most common cancer in men early.
Well, all that and much more after your latest news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Thank you. The top story. Sir Keir Starmer says the Gaza peace plan was not possible without President Trump. He says the UK has offered its full support for Trump's plan and is proud of the British contribution so far. He went on to call for any restrictions on aid to be ended. Small boat migrant Fayez Khan, who threatened to kill Reform UK leader Nigel Farage in a TikTok post last year, has been jailed for 5 years. Khan made the threat between October the 12th and 15th last year in a video which Mr Farage described as pretty chilling. Mr Farage says he's happy with the sentence given today. Former Premier League referee David Coote has pleaded guilty to making an indecent image of a child. The 43-year-old was charged in August following an investigation by Nottinghamshire Police. He's been granted conditional bail and told he must appear in court again on the 11th of December. Those are the latest headlines. For now, more news at 3 o'clock with Sam.
Tune into GB News Radio wherever you are, online, on DAB digital radio, on TuneIn, on Radio Player and on your smart speaker. Just say, play GB News.
Hello, yes, it's time for your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. The skies remain fairly grey for the vast majority. Most places, though, having another dry day and some spots seeing a little bit of sunshine. The fairly static weather patterns because of a chunky area of high pressure pretty much just sitting right over us, trapping that layer of cloud in, keeping the skies grey. That cloud is thick enough for a little bit of drizzly rain at times, particularly over parts of eastern England and northern Scotland, but across central and western Scotland, that's where we do have some good breaks in the cloud, some sunshine here, and maybe at times parts of southwest England and West Wales. But for many, it is just dull and on the coolish side. Temperatures 13, 14 degrees, but get a bit of sunshine because the winds are light. Feels quite pleasant with temperatures of 15 or 16 where it does brighten up. Northern Scotland's seeing more clouds and a few showers continuing to affect the Northern Isles in particular as we head into the evening time. But much of the mainland of Scotland will have largely clear skies through this evening. For Northern Ireland, I think mostly cloudy here, as it will be for England and Wales, but just some pockets, particularly in the west, perhaps in the southeast with a bit more breeze. But still that cloud thick enough, especially Lincolnshire, East Anglia, for a little bit of light rain and drizzle at times as the breeze continues in here. That'll be the pattern overnight as well, where we've got clear skies. It will turn a bit cold across western Scotland, maybe some mist and fog patches too, but most places just staying dry and cloudy. Breaks in the cloud could allow temperatures to dip down into single figures. Where it stays cloudy, we're looking at lows of 10 or 11 again, and it's a very similar story tomorrow. Again, thickest cloud across northern Scotland with a few showers over the Northern Isles. Thicker cloud in eastern parts of England with a bit of drizzly rain. Clearest skies, West Wales, southwest England and Scotland, where we will see some sunny spells. The vast majority, though, again, dry, but mostly cloudy, with temperatures struggling into the low teens.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from gbnews.com. The M74 is closed northbound between junctions 19 and 18 due to a road traffic incident. Motorists are encouraged to seek alternative routes. A 7.5-tonne weight restriction applies on the M48 in both directions, effective from May 27, 2025 until further notice. In Lincolnshire, the A1 northbound between junctions with the A151 and A607 has a road traffic collision with one lane closed, causing 30-minute delays. And on the trains, there are disruptions on cross-country between Brockenhurst and Bournemouth, and on Great Western Railway between Salisbury and Westbury. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 38 minutes past 2. Now, this is an interesting story. New research shows that targeted prostate checks would save the lives of so many people in this country and cost just 18 quid a head.
Experts believe that offering tests to men at most risk would prevent thousands of deaths, amounting to more than 1,200 years of life saved annually.
Well, around £20,000 would be spent for every year of life saved, which is well within the thresholds of typically considered cost-effective life-saving for the NHS. But will they do it?
Well, joining us now is health commentator and former NHS Trust Chair Roy Lilly. Roy, how effective would this really be? Because I know there are some forms of prostate cancer that actually, if it's a slow-moving one, sometimes it's better not to do anything at all. So how effective will this be? And will it be something where you can determine which type of cancer it is as well? Which version of prostate cancer?
Yes, I mean, the test, the initial screening test is very straightforward. And you are looking at someone who last year had prostate cancer. And my cancer was discovered because I had a blood test for something else, and my PSA was high. I had further tests and a biopsy, and I discovered that I had prostate cancer, stage 2 cancer. And I was then treated with radiotherapy at the London's fabulous Barts Hospital. And here I am this afternoon to tell the tale. It might have been very different for me if I hadn't have had the test. And I mean, you know, I'm a kind of an old geezer, so I'm a dot on the card for prostate cancer, but I didn't have any symptoms. I mean, occasionally I'd get up in the night and have a pee, which is one of the sort of warning signs. But, you know, if you go to bed and you've drunk 5 pints before you go to bed, you probably will get up in the night and have a pee. So I kind of discounted all that. And it came as a huge shock to me that I was a query prostate cancer. And it's only because I had that random test for something else that I discovered that I got something much more sinister. And it was really interesting. I went through the treatment with a cohort of other guys all around my same age. And my little group of 10, I think 7 of them were men of West Indian origin, because it is a particular problem for black men of a certain age to get prostate cancer, and they don't get tested. It's the same with blue-collar working men, white men. They don't bother to get tested either. This is a real killer. and we have a simple test, and we really should offer it to people. At the moment, you can go to your GP and say, well, I think I'd like a prostate test, but a lot of GPs push back on that. And so I think it should be screening in the same way that we do breast screening for women. It seems to me to be perfectly sensible. And, whatever it costs, the cost in human agony and the loss of a dad or a granddad or something like that is and a loss of someone who's economically active. These are all things that really we should be taking into account. So as you can tell, I'm rather pro prostate cancer testing.
Yeah, I think, Roy, your story must resonate with so many people. I think everyone knows someone in their lives who has come across this in one shape or form. This is the most common cancer amongst men. But one of the remarkable things about it, as your remarkable story, or perhaps, let's hope, not remarkable story, if you get it early, then it can be treated, it can be sorted, you can go on and live a healthy life. So I suppose that's one of the big early interventions that should be promoted.
Well, yes, I'm still here. I can speak wit and wisdom to your wonderful audience and to you and still enjoy life. But it may have been a very different story, and I can tell you this, there is nothing like two fantastic emotional events in your life. One is to sit opposite a doctor who looks at the screen and then looks at you and says, yes, you've got cancer. I get goosebumps just telling you what that was like. And there's nothing better to sit down with the oncologist a few months later to say, you know what, Roy, you're cancer free. So, we can do these things if we love each other and take care of each other, and the NHS is really there for its purpose. We should be doing this.
All right, Roy Lilly, really good to hear that you are cancer-free and good to talk to you. That is Roy Lilly, former NHS Trust Chair and also a health commentator.
Well, just quickly now, as a Sudanese migrant has pleaded not guilty to the murder of a 27-year-old woman after she was stabbed to death last year.
Prosecutors allege that Deng Chol Majek, understood to be an asylum seeker, used a screwdriver to kill Rhiannon White, who died in hospital 3 days later.
Well, let's get the very latest with Jack Carson, our reporter on the scene. Jack, what's gone down today?
Well, here at Wolverhampton Crown Court, the prosecution opened their case in this trial expected to last over the next 2 or 3 weeks. Deng Majek, understood to be a Sudanese asylum seeker, is accused of using a screwdriver to kill Rhiannon Sky White at the Bescott Stadium train station back in October. Now, 19-year-old Majek and the prosecution in their opening dispute his age as being 19, had been living at the Park Inn Hotel opposite the train station, which is being used to house asylum seekers. Miss White had began working at that hotel just 3 months prior and had taken on a late shift to work from 3 in the afternoon to 11 o'clock at night. And opening the case today, Michelle Healy, King's Counsel, alleged that the defendant followed Rhiannon White from the hotel where she worked and he was living. They say that he followed her down onto the train platform and then attacked her, stabbing her over and over again with a screwdriver. They say he then left her bleeding to death and casually went back to his hotel. They say that Rhiannon had been stabbed in total 23 times and that most of those injuries were to her head, but some were to the left side of her chest and arm, they say indicating that she had tried to fend off her attacker. We heard the details that 11 of the stab wounds had penetrated her skull and one in particular had damaged the brainstem, which ultimately caused her death. Majek denies all charges against him and the trial here at Wolverhampton continues.
All right, Jack Carson, thank you very much. Now, if you're in search of some holiday sun, here's the forecast of some of the top European holiday destinations.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries, all sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Whilst the UK enjoys some settled, albeit cloudy weather this week, it's going to be increasingly wet on Wednesday in Sardinia and Corsica. Also some patchy rain moving into Madeira, 1 or 2 showers for the Canary Islands, but a lot of fine weather for Iberia at the moment, having seen this low move away. But that's the low bringing some very lively thunderstorms on Wednesday to Sardinia and Corsica, eventually moving through southern Italy into Greece as well, turning things unsettled later this week.
Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
Because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes and Kerr weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints. How many fingers have I got up?
About 10.
So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain was once the envy of the world, but look around. A nation that no longer knows what it is or where it's going. A country that's broken. How do we fix Britain? How do we bring it back? Friday night with Matt Goodwin at 8 p.m, only on GB News.
At GB News, we love to hear from you, our loyal community. So drop us a line at gbnews.com/yoursay. There, you can talk to each other and also to the presenters live on air. gbnews.com/yoursay, because GB News is your channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akua, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Coming up to 10 to 3. Now, the actress Joanna Page says she faced prejudice, not for her talent, but for her accent. Told she couldn't act simply because she's Welsh.
And in a new interview, Gavin and Stacey Starr describes the persistent snobbery and bias she faced early in her career.
Well, she claims these attitudes reflect a wider prejudice against Welsh voices and culture. Still lingers in parts of the entertainment industry.
Well, I love the Welsh accent. Well, joining us now is Welsh farmer Gareth Wyn-Jones from Snowdonia. I was about to do my best attempt and then I thought, no, don't do a Welsh accent. No. Gareth, I think the Welsh accent's beautiful, but have you faced prejudice because of your accent?
Nawn da. That's good afternoon, by the way.
Is it? Thank you.
In Welsh. Just in case you thought I was speaking French. Not literally. You know, a lot of people will take the mickey and have a joke. Yeah, I wouldn't accept anybody having prejudice towards my language, my accent. I'm sometimes called the Welsh Scouser because there's a little bit of a twang where we live. I don't know if you can hear it, but we're not far from Liverpool. So there is a bit of a twang there, that the Welsh accent. But, you know, every area, if you're in the south, their Welsh is very, very different. And if you're in the north here as well, you know, there's a lot of different areas that'll have a different kind of twang to their accents, which is lovely, and that's what we should be celebrating, all accents. And we can have fun with it, but it shouldn't be prejudice. People should not be losing a job or not being, having that interview because of where they come from and the way they speak. It should be all on their ability to do that job.
And I think the Welsh accent is one of the loveliest to listen to.
It's so melodic.
Yeah.
Listen, no.
My wife really likes it.
I wouldn't try it. I think we should leave it there. I'm not going to try it, Gareth.
Well, before we go, shall we do one word? The longest word? Come on,
go on then.
Gorgeris, Windrobwell, Santa Ciliog, Gogagoch.
We love it. Right,
amazing. Glad we could have time for that. Well, this has been Good Afternoon Britain. It's it from us, but don't worry.
Next.
Hi guys, they're calling to Keir Starmer the John Terry of politicians, and today the IMF showed Britain the red card. We've got the highest inflation for the next 2 years, the highest unemployment since COVID. Labour isn't working. Britain isn't working. Plus, after a 9-fold increase in Gazan refugees to Britain, should we be letting Palestinians in? Or is a cautionary tale from Denmark telling us absolutely not? Plus, I'll be joined in the studio by the Red Wall Rottweiler. He's about as subtle as a house brick to the head. Lee Anderson is back in town, of course, because politicians are now back in the mix over the way. And as girls aged over 12 were banned from a Muslim fun run, I'll be asking, where's the diversity in banning people you don't like simply because they're too old and the wrong sex? That's all coming next, 3 till 6. But first, here's your weather forecast. See you soon.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Welcome along to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. The weather's not really shifting very far, very quickly at the moment. Tomorrow will be more of the same. Like today, some places seeing a bit of sunshine. Most places just staying cloudy, all thanks to this chunky area of higher pressure sitting over the UK and keeping things fairly static. Close to the centre of the high, we've seen some good spells of sunshine today, and some breaks in the cloud continuing across Scotland will allow it to turn a little chilly, maybe 1 or 2 mist and fog patches. Most places keeping the cloud, a little bit of drizzle from the cloud across parts of eastern England at times, but most areas staying dry. Temperatures holding up in high single figures, 10 or 11 in some places. But with those clearer skies in western Scotland, we might not be too far from freezing to start Wednesday, but we should again here see some good spells of sunshine. Thicker clouds as we go through the night and tomorrow across Shetland, and a little bit of light rain and drizzle likely here. Elsewhere across the far north of Scotland, light showers are possible, but as I say, through central parts of Scotland, we should again see some sunshine, but there could be some early morning fog. For the rest of the UK, certainly most of England, Wales, much of Northern Ireland, another fairly glum start to the day. Thick cloud around. In places, still producing a little bit of light rain and drizzle, particularly close to eastern coasts. And in western areas, that's where we are most likely, at least, to see some breaks in the cloud and a little bit of sunshine. Not a great deal of change through the day. The winds are pretty light, so if you've got the sunny spells, it feels quite pleasant with temperatures getting up into the teens. If you're stuck under the gloom, then it does feel quite cool with temperatures a touch below the average for the time of year. Through the course of Wednesday evening, we don't see a great deal of change. Keep some clearer skies across parts of Scotland, which could again allow a little bit of mist to form and some thicker cloud and the odd shower in the east. There's the outlook for Thursday and into the weekend. We are likely to see something of a change as we go towards Sunday.
Expect warm spells with the odd rude interruption. Box Boilers sponsors the weather on GB News.
There's just 3 weeks left to see how you could be our biggest winner this year. First, you could be driving away with this brand new Benamar Primera motorhome. This luxury vehicle comfortably sleeps 4, has its own fitted kitchen and bathroom areas, and comes complete with fitted awning and bicycle rack. And that's not all, as we'll also give you a whopping £30,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. For another chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB16 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 31st of October. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
For anybody who doesn't know, Huntington's is a rare neurological disorder. It affects the body, mind, and the whole system through a faulty gene passed down through families. And it just causes absolute havoc. And, it affects everything, every part of you, and it's in the most horrendous way. And the knock-on effect of all the families it affects is enormous. It really is. So.
Well, as we heard there from the professor, he says this changes everything. Is that how you see this, as a major breakthrough?
Absolutely. I mean, this is what we've been hoping for, but we're a pretty realistic bunch as well. But we, I still can't believe it, to be perfectly honest. I keep pinching myself and thinking, oh my God, is this actually happening? Because that's how much it means. It really does. We'll try and do our bit for charities and raise the funds for UCL so they can do these amazing trials and get involved as much as we can, but still.
I mean, it's not as straightforward as having an injection or taking a pill. I mean, I've read that it involves an 18-hour operation during which this particular drug is actually injected into the brain and starts to affect the DNA.
18 hours of brain surgery. I'd take 180 hours of brain surgery over the horrors that lie ahead with Huntington's disease. So, to some people it might sound pretty grueling, but actually it's just the most exciting thought, having the opportunity given to us to be in this position, to go to surgery and, make a real difference.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I think for far too long in this country, millions of people felt as though they weren't represented at all by the establishment media.
GB News was needed because there literally was no other voice. Everyone was saying the same thing.
GB News exists because there is a desperate need for fearless journalism that puts the people first.
GB News came on the scene as a disruptor, and it has always been a disruptor ever since.
The mainstream is all about keeping the status quo as it is, ticking along quite nicely. They don't want to ask difficult questions.
But journalism is journalism at the end of the day, and we're not here to serve any masters. Our masters are our audience.
Charlie Peters, he gave a voice to the